Order Monday, June 8th, 2015. Councilors, tonight we have three on the agenda. We have information technology purchasing in the Fitchburg Public Schools. Because information technology and purchasing are on page 51, under the new proposal by the mayor for a chief operating officer. The mayor is going to make a presentation regarding this budget, and then the department heads will also be available to answer questions. Madam Mayor.
Good evening, councilors. I passed out a handout. I just want to make sure that everybody received one. It has some information on procurement and information technology for fiscal year 2016, outlining some of the goals that I think we hopefully all share, and some of the action items that we're looking at, some of which are embodied in the budget and others are not so much numbers, more of operations and processes. So if you could please bear with me, I'm just going to give you an overview of the changes and why this budget looks different than you have in the past. Some goals that I've heard and share are looking at reducing full-time employment, so FTEs, as a way to both save money, but also to look at not only operation costs from year to year, but also to look at long-term pension costs. That was an overarching theme. There was also a need to increase effectiveness, coordination, automation, and to produce the right size staffing. Without getting into the audit presentation that you had last week, some of the ways in which we are doing this is to literally reduce FTEs. So the budget actually, as proposed back in April 15th, has even changed from April 15th to what was submitted on May 15th. We were phasing out some of the FTEs in procurement. Namely, we were phasing out the chief procurement officer and the procurement officer position. The procurement officer was originally in this budget for 3 months. And that individual in that position has since resigned. So we actually don't have anybody in that position. So I just zeroed out that line item in the budget. The chief procurement officer, we're looking at doing is phasing out that position and creating a combined chief procurement officer and chief operating officer. And it, again, the salary range, the job description, all of that is something that needs to go before the city council. I know there's a petition, which is early phase. If that petition passes, then we would provide you with the ordinance that has all the specificity of what that position would do, in addition to a job description and a salary range, all of which I would propose that we do together. So we would have a committee that would include appointed city councilors that would work on this particular position. So this is still in its early phases. So this position does not exist yet, but that's proposed in the salary. So what that means for procurement is that there currently is only one individual in that department whose budget has essentially already been approved by the school committee. And that is the deputy procurement officer. So that's 100% paid for by the schools. And right now, any procurement that is city funding is up in flux, in that the two positions that oversaw the city side, one has been eliminated and the other one is looking to transition from a CPO to a combined CPO-COO. So I hope that makes sense. In terms of the clerical and contract position, this is a combined line item for both procurement and IT. So the idea is that 3 full-time FTEs that were in this current fiscal year 15's budget would be reduced to 1 FTE plus 1 shared clerical and plus 1 chief operating officer that also does chief procurement officer positions. So the overall FTEs and the overall salary and operating budget for procurement would go down in fiscal year 16 from 15. But again, this is dependent on the creation of a position that doesn't exist. Should the city council not approve a COO position, then I cannot create one or fund one. And if that were the case, then we would have to figure out what we would do with covering the city side. So that would be city dollars in existing positions, which is the chief procurement officer, to make sure that we have coverage over city procurement. So I have more to go, but I just wanted to stop there just to see if there's any questions on that change, because I know it's a little complicated.
Councilor Beazall?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at this. So right now we have a chief procurement officer and we have a procurement officer. And there seems to be throughout the year people having concerns that things aren't getting processed quickly enough. So if I follow the logic here, we're going to replace one position, the chief procurement officer's position, with the chief operating officer, who's supposed to not only be in charge of all the procurement, but is also supposed to be in charge of everything that goes on in IT, and where looks like we're funding for 6 months a chief procurement officer. So right now we have 24 months of associates in that department, and they're falling behind. And next year, if I'm reading this right, we have 9 months of the COO, 6 months of the CPO, which is 15 months. And one of those people are going to be in charge of the whole department. How's that? I guess my question is how's that going to work? Because it looks like the only thing you're doing is you're adding a clerical position in there. So either we're going to, it just seems to me like either we're going to be expecting way too much out of the COO, because we're losing a lot of, seems like valuable time here.
Could I answer that?
Absolutely.
So I think we can all agree that the way that procurement operates today cannot be the way that procurement operates tomorrow. In reviewing the operations, we do not have the right size staff. So we sort of have, I would say, 3 people in the middle. We had a chief procurement officer, deputy procurement officer, and procurement officer. So 3 professionals who were in the middle. What we are missing is we are missing clerical, so somebody at a significantly reduced rate doing the clerical work. So when you have somebody making 70 grand a year who's doing the work that somebody could be making 30 grand a year, then that's not a right size fit. We also have a need in procurement office and in the city for greater management across different departments. So if we just have the staff who is just doing the day-to-day work, so work comes in, do it, work comes out, work comes in, do it. I mean, it would be great if it was a cog in the wheel that moved smoothly and that no one thought about and it was just, being greased and that was it. I'd love to say that it was that easy, but the procurement has fluctuated over the years. So even just looking back 20 years, we've gone from 2 to 3 FTEs. Sometimes we bring in partial, sometimes it's clerical. There's actually, it's probably one of the least consistent departments over the last 20 years in terms of staffing levels, because sometimes people, like for example, people were brought in when we were overseeing the school building project. And then when that goes away, things go up and down. So if you're hiring permanent staff to deal with these fluctuations, that's very difficult. So what I'm looking for is consistent skill sets to manage that kind of change, not just to do the work, and then also have the right size clerical staff. So if we have 3 people in the middle, I'm looking at sort of expanding the range of the skill sets like this. If there is a chief operating officer, then your procurement. So procurement is you are procuring goods and services and executing contracts. If all of that stuff is being done, and an inflow of all the departments, they just do what they do and then they push it out, then it's missing some key management pieces. So for example, if all of the stuff came in January and then nothing came in February and then a bunch of stuff came in March and nothing came in April, then what you're doing is you're having a staff that's fixed dealing with a workflow from month to month and year to year doing this. You also have a staff that doesn't necessarily know when things are going to come in. Because the procurement office is not operations right now, because they're not managing and coordinating with, they're managing on a project, but they're not saying, I want to know everything that wastewater is doing, everything that's water is doing, so that I have the skill set to anticipate what's going to come in. Then they are not managing other staff to say, okay, schools, you send your busing contract to us in June and July because that's when you have time to do it. But you also have to compete with, 15 other departments. We really need to do your busing contracts in February and March when there's a downtime. So you have somebody who's there who is moving things around and managing departments to say, we need a consistent workflow so that if your staffing is pretty fixed like this, because you can't fluctuate staff every month, that the workflow is also efficient. Otherwise, what you have is you end up overstaffing because you're staffing here to deal with the workflow here, which means you have all of these inefficiencies every month. And that's where we have staffed the department to meet maximum demand. Not only did we do that, which is inefficient, but we also, because of the lack of management, even the maximum staff for the maximum demand is not enough. The not enough piece is all this other stuff, the effectiveness, the coordination, and so on. Right now there is it wasn't defined when I came in, so if it was defined at one point in time, I don't really know, but there's not a defined relationship between IT and procurement as they deal with staff. It's been first come, first serve, and that's been the way it's been. It can't operate that way. So you actually need like an IT steering committee and an operating officer to go out there and manage all of the stuff for the year. The other thing that's missing too is the capital piece. If we are having departments who are relying on deferred maintenance to meet their budget goals, then we end up having all of the series of emergencies that we're having right now. So if we have somebody who knows the schedule, knows the staff, knows the resources to be able to procure goods and services, has relationship with vendors, knows how much things cost, and they know what's going on in the city, they can create a capital plan that is consistent, let's say over 5 years, and then portion that up over the years so that they can work proactively on these kinds of things. What I'm finding is that there are capital items and there are operation items that span multiple departments. Those are often not initiated by individual departments. They're initiated by myself or they're initiated by an emergency. The problem with that is that mayors often don't have that particular expertise, and because we change every 2 years, it's not that consistent, and we're not at the office every day to oversee that. The emergency piece is also very costly, very inexpensive, and it exacerbates the issue when you have fluctuating demand. So the idea of bringing in a manager is that I think we all understand that if there's a business and there's no manager and you just have the staff running things, there is a value to having a manager there to make things more efficient. And then there's also a value to having lower cost staff do lower cost items. By reducing the overall FTEs, by increasing management, by having lower cost staff, then if anything were to fluctuate over the years, those are things that could be planned or those are things that could be procured ahead of time.
So when I'm looking at this, and it looks like this job is, because this is funded for 9 months, it's going to pay about $110,000 a year, okay? From what I gather from what you're saying is, why didn't we just go out and hire a city manager for $150,000? Because my fear is, in the report that they handed us the other night, they said most of our inefficiencies come because we're not using things like Munis to do procurement. my thought process here is, if all of a sudden we're going to start introducing Munis into procurement, you just don't say, here's Munis, use it. You have to have everyone on board, from workstations to training. And honestly, when I'm looking at, after 6 months, we're not going to have a chief procurement officer, you might have to send people out to train for 2 or 3 months just how to use this system. So I guess my thought process is why not just hire a city manager to come in and run everything so that the mayor doesn't have to worry about it, because you're talking about departments and everything. A city manager would oversee all the departments and have that day-to-day contact that it doesn't seem like it's occurring now on a day-to-day basis.
Could I answer? You have a couple of questions in there. So first, let me say that to change to a city manager position is a completely, entirely different process. The operations piece that would provide added value to the city are some things that potentially a city manager would do, but we don't need a full boat city manager. And there are also city managers and town managers out there who have terrible capital planning and needs. So it's not necessarily quite the right fit. But that being said, $110,000 is the absolute upper maximum that we would advertise a position to. If we brought in somebody who, for example, had those kinds of skill sets, so they were a manager and they were the chief procurement officer, which actually happens in many communities, then you would have an operations person who not only knows how to do procurement, but knows how to do it across different departments. So that would be a positive. What a operations person will bring on top of a chief procurement officer is the added value that we're looking for. The difference between a chief operating officer and a city manager is not the added value that we're looking for. In terms of, why would, do we want to hire a city manager? I frankly would break down what that kind of individual person would do. And I would say that a city manager is mostly an operations person, and then also then reports to a political body. In this case, the COO would report to the mayor and the city council. That's the way that I would have it, especially with capital items and long-term planning, because most of the stuff that a COO creates is they generate the work to come for the year and also for the next 5 years or 20 years. Right now, no offense to Dick, but Dick is sort of staffing the capital piece, and he's an auditor. He knows the numbers. There's a difference between knowing the numbers and verifying the numbers and capital planning. There's a lot of skill sets that I have. Capital planning is not necessarily one of them. We have a capital commission. So the idea of bringing somebody on board who not only has that skill set, but then has the power to either procure it themselves or designate it to a staff or outsource the procurement, and knows how busy the city is, coordinates all that under one person and creates that consistency from year to year. The hope is that I think we can all agree that every year, because there's a delay in the procurement of a good, a service, a maintenance, we are probably losing at least 6, if not 7 figures worth of maintenance dollars, items that become more expensive, opportunities that we forego. So the idea is that this person brings an added value between the chief procurement officer and the operations that will have a greater return on investment for the city.
Do we have Munis in place now to do procurement?
We have a group of department heads who have looked at, I think, 5 modules, all of which are very costly, and they are doing, they're looking at it in conjunction with this process here. So, for example, if we do not procure, so we don't, but if we don't and we choose not to procure it, then we are going to continue to be staff heavy. The idea about acquiring Munis modules for procurement is that it will increase automation and it will lead to direct reductions in FTEs and operating dollars. But the review talked about how costly the initial, because you have an initial cost, which if you bought all 5 modules, it's $100,000. It's a lot of money. And then it would be over $30,000 every year to maintain it. The initial feedback from the departments is that we really only need 2 at the most to be efficient. So that would be, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but let's say it's at a $40,000 initial cost, and that it would be a $16,000 a year operating cost. So your return on investment is more like 3 years, so you're not getting it right away. But not only are you actually getting a return on investment that's only 3 years, you're actually getting automation and transparency. So you're reducing the amount of errors, you're automating things, everybody can go into a system and see where things are, and you have an immediate reduction in FTEs, which is linked to the healthcare and pension and so on.
Okay, just a couple comments, and then I know there's a lot of people that have a lot more questions. First of all, I would not be able to support this. I don't think it's going to do what you want it to do. And secondly, we just paid $25,000 to have a study done that basically said we should be using Munis for procurement because it's going to save us thousands of dollars. And I think Councilor Joseph said last week, if we just take the recommendations that these people gave us and just take this and stick it up on the shelf because we think we know better, then we've wasted $25,000. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I just want to make sure that I understand the direction that we're heading for fiscal year 2016 in procurement department. 1 full-time staff, a procurement officer, plus 1 shared clerical, plus the chief operating, the COO, correct? Is that what it would boil down to?
Correct.
For the procurement office. COO, 1 full-time, and 1 shared clerical. And are those numbers, was Munis taken into account with that decision? Like that, through Munis, would it be able to cut down to that low of staff? Because
the purchase of Munis was taken into consideration but not funded via this budget cycle. So I don't have any evidence that purchasing the 2 Munis modules that is right now favored by a group of department heads would reduce a specific amount of FTE. I'm pretty sure it would, but I can't say that the purchase here is going to reduce this by 0.3 FTE or 0.7 FTE. I just don't have enough information to be able to provide that. But it would make things easier because right now we are manually recording and manually scheduling and manually intaking and manually outputting probably thousands and thousands of requisitions and orders and contracts and emails and so on every year.
how long have we had the current Munis system? How long has that been in place?
My understanding is that we were one of the first to put it in place. It's been in place since the 90s, basically as is, without any additional modules.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
With all due respect, the mayor is the COO. The COO, by definition, is a position of one of the highest ranking in the organization and is responsible for the operations of the entire business. This position only has jurisdiction over 2 offices, so it's not a COO. COO is sitting before us. Number 2, it's frustrating to listen to this. 8 years under one administration, and 8 years later, we still are reorganizing things. We had a reorg in 2008 that failed. We had a reorg in 2010 that didn't pass, but it went through anyway illegally. And now we have another reorg to take care of a problem that doesn't require a reorg. I don't even have to get comments from the mayor anymore because I've heard enough about it. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is, as the audit showed, there is no management. None. So the people at these positions are being thrown to the wolves and have been for 8 years. And we honestly are going to sit here and believe that this magical person that we're going to hire who can do both IT and procurement, which from the industry experts I've talked to, through my company and other companies we do business with, they thought that that was unheard of. that someone would have that much knowledge in both of those skill sets. So there's no guarantee we're going to hire somebody. What if we hire somebody in November? The existing administration is going to leave a month after. There's going to be a new administration right after that. If we're going to make a substantial change here, shouldn't we wait for the next administration before we do this? 8 years we have been asking for changes. 8 years we've been fielding concerns and questions from people about problems. And it's taken 8 years to get to this point, and this is the solution. Last year we had, a few years ago, the procurement office had one full-time agent and one clerical staffer full-time. Whose decision was it to get rid of the full-time clerical person? The mayor. Whose decision was it to add a second procurement agent in its place? The mayor. So at that time I was concerned because if you get rid of the clerical staff, that procurement agent you just hired is now going to be doing clerical work at a procurement agent salary. And the audit firm last week confirmed as much, saying there are people in purchasing who are doing clerical work. That might have something to do with all of the delays. Number 3, last year we were told, well, we don't need 2 now, we need 3. So we've gone from 1 to 3 in 6 or 7 years. And we were told last year, having 3 full-time agents would get the backlog down. That third agent was supposed to do only school-related work. Can you guess if that person was doing only school-related work? I'll save you the suspense. He wasn't. Even though, predictably, we said that was going to happen. So that person's now gone. We're going to have a COO who's going to have IT responsibilities, capital responsibilities, and I used to be a capital analyst for Textron. That is not a side job. That is a very intensive job for a city of this size. So you're going to have someone in charge of IT who's also going to be a procurement officer. So then my next question is, great, where is my guarantee that that new person is going to be doing purchasing work? They got other responsibilities. So that's my third problem with this. My fourth problem with this is capital management requires the chief executive officer meeting with department heads once or twice a month and asking them very simply, give me a list of capital needs. It's called a 5-year forward operating plan. Textron didn't have a COO. DRS doesn't have a COO. They have a CFO, and I might call your attention to the city code, which says quite clearly that we have a CFO. Or we did have a CFO, but we don't have one right now. The auditor, treasurer, collector, procurement officer, and the assessor shall have the authorities and be subject to the responsibilities established by the laws of the Commonwealth. The mayor shall appoint a director of finance and administration who shall coordinate the city's finance team under the direction of the mayor. IT and procurement fall under finance and administration. There is no one that is the director of finance and administration. Why not? So now we got to add another chief executive officer to do the job the mayor isn't doing. I can't accept this for all of those reasons. And quite frankly, in these audit findings, it does not mention anywhere here that that is a solution to the problems going on. It says we need clerical staff. And again, we're going to share clerical with IT. What is the point? There used to be a full-time clerical person for purchasing. So we're going to share clerical. We're going to share the COO's duties. How is that going to improve purchasing? It's not. Just like adding a second procurement agent didn't, and getting rid of the clerical person, and just like adding a third procurement agent didn't. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I've heard this so many times, and if the mayor wants my suggestion, which I've given many times, it's not a COO. It's not a CFO. It's establishing a process where there is none. There are things in this audit finding that do not require someone of a senior level of experience to fix. So It's frustrating for me because we've heard this for 7 years, and now 7.5 years later, this is the solution. There is no guarantee, ladies and gentlemen, even if you agree with this, we're even going to have someone of this caliber in by the end of the year. There's no guarantee. We may never find somebody. I would prefer, if there was going to be a radical change, we wait and let the new administration, the next administration, deal with this problem, and let them determine if they feel a chief operating officer is the way to go, or there might be something else to be done. And we have 3 agents where a lot of cities and towns have 1. What is so special about those other cities and towns that Fitchburg does not have? The auditing firm also said, finding number 12, a collaborative relationship between city departments and the purchasing department is essential to success. And the mayor made comments just now saying, we're losing opportunities. The COO is integral for capital improvements. Procurement has fluctuated over the years. There's no defined relationship with IT and procurement. Well, whose fault is that? Procurement has fluctuated in staffing. Well, whose fault is that? Procurement has no clerical. Well, whose fault is that? And I don't lay any claim to this because I voted against every budget for the last 8 years, so I'm just throwing that out there. But there needs to be consistent skill sets, right-sized clerical staff. I'm telling you, I might have to apologize. I've been critical of these offices for so many years, but you know what? All road leads to the top. This whole audit report says one thing. With no management, with no engagement, with disengagement, you have chaos. And that's what's going on. So we've already tried it 4 times. Or 3 times. This is option number 4. Forgive me if I'm not confident this is going to be the solution to fix all the problems. And I got news for everybody. It won't be. Thank you.
Council Boishman.
Yeah. Can I answer a question? That position that you want me to vote on accept, that new COO, why don't we try to, like Council Beazle says in the report says, try the Munich system first at a cost of $100,000. Train the people, train them, and see where it goes from there. It's like me telling Lenny, I'm going to give you 3 snow blowers, 18 shovels, and I want you to do our city streets in a timely manner. And he comes back and he says, well, if you give me this machine, I can do it in a timely manner. And you say, oh, no. We're going to add you 1 more person, and they can get it all done. And all of a sudden, we get another snowstorm, and then he says, well, we didn't even get done Norfolk Street. And we're back on Norfolk Street with the 3 machines, but if you gave us this big machine, we can do it all. According to Mr. Jim Reynolds, he was on one of these audits on a voluntary basis. He did not get paid. He says, the system is broken in purchasing. That's what he told me twice. It's broken. And he says if we give them the proper tools, we can improve the work immensely and might even be able to cut down from 3 to 2 to 1. But who's ever in that department needs the proper tools. This is what I'm told. And I understand that what that department does, and when you're working for the government, you got to cross your T's and you got to put the periods in and everything else. I understand that because I work for GE, and we had to fill out paperwork, and we have to make sure it was made right because we were in the front office and we were getting reprimanded. So why don't we do it that way before we start hiring, and maybe we'll see a big change throughout the city.
If I can respond to that. So let me just say that there is no one right way to do this. Unfortunately, in the budget process, I can only propose one way. If the majority of you do not like this way, this is one of the reasons why I tried to submit this budget on April 15th, so that I could get feedback. This is why I've had some individual one-on-one meetings. This is why we've had presentations, so that I could solicit input. I can only give you one way. I've had iterations of this where I've eliminated all staff, and it was one big lump sum of consulting. So trust me, I've looked at about 17 different options. The one I came with here was meant to provide discussion and options. So because it's proposing a position that doesn't exist, it was meant to generate a discussion about operations. in general, macro operations. So it's the coordination within that department and between these departments and the other departments that are a problem. If you believe that 100% of the blame lies on my complete lack of management, you have every right to say, well, we're just going to leave things as is, or we're going to change things based on your votes on this budget, and everything is going to be great when the next mayor comes in. That could be the case. You could believe that. I will just at least give you options and try to do as much homework as I can so it's easier. So we have these public discussions before the next mayor comes in. If you believe that the operations and the difficulties within procurement and between procurement and other departments go beyond just my terrible management skills, apparently, then we'd like to have some of those discussions. Right now, for example, we don't have right-sized staffing. So one of the things that I think we'd have to look for majority, again, this is just my proposal, the majority of you would have to look and say, we agree with that clerical contract because we believe there's clerical. You could also come in and say, we want to eliminate that altogether. You could eliminate the chief operating officer, chief procurement officer, and say, we're going to reduce this budget by $82,500. The problem with that is then that leaves me with one staff member who's 100% paid for by the schools. So at least for 6 months, I'm overseeing a procurement department which has $0 for city procurement. So this is not personal. This is all of your opinions are going to go into making a very complex decision. What I'm trying to do is to say that whatever's happening here is not working. We need to have a discussion about what needs to change. So even if you say that everything's going to get better when I leave, if I leave, do you want the next mayor to have what? Do you want them to have 2 FTEs, 1 FTE, 1.5 FTEs? These are decisions that you are collectively making right now. I'm just providing you with the options to do so. And I will do the best I can over the next 6 months to fix whatever problems there are because there was not a procurement system when I came in. There wasn't an IT department. So maybe I'm good at creating some of these things, but not overseeing or implementing them. We haven't had changes to Munis in decades. So if anything, we brought departments together to explore. We've had presentations. We have a recommendation. I can certainly wait until the new mayor to do that. Frankly, we don't have the funds to do it. So I would have to propose any Munis changes out of free cash, and it is up to you to do. I can only give you proposals. So this is what I'm doing. I'm looking at ways to enhance citywide operational staff. If you don't want it, then you don't have to do it. You could reduce that number and say, we want to have that chief procurement officer for 9 months, not 6, so that you have somebody doing city procurement and so that you have 3 months overlap, so you can give the next mayor those kinds of options. So I'm not pushing for anything to happen in the next 6 months. I'm just pushing for us to explore options and changes.
Councilor Bean.
Thank you, Mr. President. And maybe I've been around too long and have a long memory, but I recall when at one time the city auditor was the chief procurement officer overseeing the purchasing department and also helped staff the Capital Improvements Commission, which I thought was a great model, but obviously we moved from that in the support of change in that. I mean, it's sort of like the old model of economic development. I thought having the redevelopment authority and the economic development director work together was a good way, but we changed it. But sometimes maybe going back to the old ways might be better. And in that case, I thought it went well, and I thought there was an oversight there. One of the things about this study that kind of bothered me after reading it was that there are a lot of simple things to do that meant putting together templates, using a computer, which should be something simple, but whether it be Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, and that. And what the people kept saying is everything's done by hand and written, and that shouldn't be the case. I mean, that doesn't take a budget item. It doesn't take much other than some training, and maybe somebody, whoever, I guess the mayor or whoever, telling them this is what we need to do. It's been recommended. So what frustrates me is that we have these simple things to do that could help improve the system and make us more efficient and allow us to gather data, because they couldn't even gather data, they said, because that information is all handwritten. They get it from other towns. So I just hope that we can put those simple things they had in place ASAP, if not in place now, because, again, why do we have this report if we're not going to take advantage of it? But my sense is, call me old-fashioned, but sometimes the old-fashioned ways were the better ways. Thank you.
Councilor Beazall.
First of all, I know that the mayor had pointed out that, she had given us this earlier. Last year I was actually on the committee that was actually supposed to look into who we're going to hire. And at one point, I had sent an email to the mayor and said, there's efficiencies that occur here in our system that need to be rectified. And she sent back an email stating that my job was to find somebody to do the audit, not to solve the issue. We have a lot of people at the university, Fitchburg Plan, that can help us solve some of these issues. We just need to reach out to the professionals, and they're there willing to give free help. Okay? We don't have to spend a lot of money to find people to help us. What we need to do is we need to be willing to listen to change, but more importantly, we need to listen to follow up on what people recommend. I think what happens all too often is we have a lot of people making recommendations, but the city itself doesn't follow through on their end of the bargain when it comes to actually following through on some of this. It's discouraging to read this, that we're still not using computers to the way that we should, because of the fact that I have never read anywhere that companies or cities have gotten rid of all their computers because they're no good. We need to invest more in technology, and we need to teach our folks that run the city how to use this technology. It's really the only way that we're going to survive. As far as department managers, I communicate with people in Salisbury, North Carolina, and Maine. I don't even know who these people are. I've never seen them. But when I have issues, I send them stuff. They send me stuff. Honestly, you could probably sit in an office in City Hall and never see a department manager, yet you can communicate with them on a daily basis and find out exactly what they're looking for. And I don't know exactly what Munis looks like for purchasing, but I know that from what I've read about it, everybody will be able to see where the mistakes are made and what the projects are and how they're updated. I don't think we need somebody to oversee that necessarily, but we need to come up with a plan on how we're going to implement this throughout the whole city. Thank you.
Could I make a
Respond?
comment?
Absolutely.
So let me just say that what is proposed here is in agreement with the theory that you put forward. I just want to emphasize that we are on an upward trajectory. So are we as far along in using technology and in operational efficiency as I would like? No. Have we been working on it for 8 years? Yes. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, I had made a comment during these very sessions that we were moving away from crisis management to trying to stabilize to forward thinking. I think some of what I'm trying to propose here is forward thinking. Would I have liked to be forward thinking 6 or 8 years ago? I would have. But let me just state a couple things. Our schools were not using email 8 years ago. Our buildings were not connected 8 years ago. So some of the infrastructure to even make what you're saying possible had to be created. There's been a lot of turnover in staff. So I've been focusing on hiring, on macro projects, and the operational efficiencies in terms of talking between departments. If whatever hours I've spent on being a COO were focused, because I did prioritize them over internal operation efficiencies on external things like the foreclosure issue, the NICE issue, code enforcement, getting tablets in the hands, doing C-click fix. So every year there's been something. And if you're saying that, we wish you did 2 things versus 1 thing every year, I wish I did the same thing too. But I can tell you that, no one was idle, and that everything we've done to this point in time has been kind of a one-time thing that creates year-to-year efficiency. So we have been proactive in that sense. Do we have a lot more to go? Absolutely. We couldn't have turned the tide completely, but I think that we've done a lot in that trajectory. I don't think we could have had these kinds of conversations 4, 5, 6 years ago, even though you might have been saying, we want these things done from a day-to-day basis, you know, we were focused on many, many things, including the things that you were talking about. I had made the decision to prioritize other kinds of investments, other kinds of changes. And, you know, again, maybe the new chief executive will focus more on some of these internal things. And I would hope that the work that our department heads have done so far have enabled us to focus on some of the more mundane internal efficiencies, because we have made great strides in email, connecting, changing, getting the right department heads, making investments, having better customer service with staff, investing in technology, and so on.
Councilor Dean Talley.
My suggestion is that my suggestion is we keep the procurement agent for the schools, we keep the CPO in the purchasing area for the city, and we hire a full.
This is a suggestion or a recommendation for?
Well, I can't recommend that we add stuff to the budget. I'm giving a suggestion.
Clarify.
We should have the procurement officer in the schools, we should have the procurement officer for the city, and we should have a full-time clerical staffer. Right now, we have 3 full-time agents in the FY15 budget, so going to 2 and 1 clerical will still save the city some money. You have 1 agent and 1 clerical staffer, like it used to be in the city side, and you have someone taking care of the schools. That, to me, would be a good compromise for right now, which is less costly than what we're doing under the current model. And IT is a whole other subject for me, but for procurement, I mean, if the mayor needs suggestions and she wants to open the dialogue, that's my suggestion. 2 people in purchasing, 1 clerical person for purchasing only. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I would like to know, Mayor, from you, the plan on establishing a process, because again, I don't want to leave the city out, you know, just hanging there with no staff. So what is the plan to establish the process to get us to where we need to be?
I have to say that, going back to what Councilor Boschman said, it is critical that we do purchase at least 1 or 2 Munis modules.
Okay.
Even if the staff starts to put things in Excel spreadsheets instead of on a handwritten ledger, it's still manual. It really is. So the problem is that I think one of the reasons why we haven't done it before is because I'm going to be asking you for 40 or 50 grand and then asking you for an annual maintenance fee. So it doesn't look like it's a savings because your one-time costs and your operating fee it's more than the staff. You're actually increasing your budget, but you are creating operational efficiencies. So there is a give and take there. I would hate to leave manual ledgers and Excel spreadsheets and to the next mayor. I think if there's anything that I do, so if I don't touch staff, if I just improve that in itself is a good baseline plan, because now everybody sees it automated, they can see it, it's on a computer, it's not bottlenecked in terms of one person's hand who then has to stop, take time, look at where things are, and get back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that being said, there are still things that are not embodied in the Munis module. Like there's still forms, there's still paper forms, there's still service contracts. There are things that are not automated because most of the stuff that takes a lot of time is individual. They're not pro forma. We would look at figuring out how to reduce those kinds of things by making what we can more pro forma. So it's not as simple as buying a software. So this is where intensive time management has to take place. And it's not necessarily a skill set of mine. So I will do the best that I can in terms of looking at contracts. I will probably need to get legal to help and say, can we uniform contracts so that we reduce time? But I don't want to be the legal expert to tell them what to do. Some of the immediate things that we're going to do is, and this is where we'd have to work with department heads, they don't like to do this. So this is where strong management has to come to play, is I have to say, okay, you have to purchase fuel once and then adjust it out again. You can't purchase fuel every other week. Okay, wastewater, twice a week I'm getting an order for sodium bisulfate. You really need to have one, because then that reduces the time. So if I can do and focus exclusively on those changes in the next 6 months, the next mayor will have automation, he'll have instant information at his fingertips, a plan in place, and reduced workload. And then we can reassess at that point in time what kind of staffing the city needs. So I can't tell you the long-term plan after that, but what I can try to do is create the efficiencies, make the automated investments, streamline some of the forms, work with legal, work with department heads to reduce workload. And then that's a you guys will discuss it again next year.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor, you'd gotten to the point in your presentation where you stopped and took questions. Continue on.
Okay. Frankly, I think we touched upon effectiveness, coordination, automation, and the right size staffing. If I could just, because I know this is sort of a choose your own adventure, and I know that you might reduce a number and then not know what I'm going to do. So I think that it would be maybe helpful for you to know what I would do. I'm hearing that you want full-time clerical. The $29,000 is not enough for full-time clerical. What I can do is I can bring back a suggested amount for what that is. Clearly, the $82,000 is too rich, I think, for a lot of your taste. You're seeing a big number there. If you want full-time clerical, and that's something that you sort of can verbalize, then some of that 82.5 can be used for clerical. If you're looking for the chief procurement officer to remain in place through the next mayor and allow the next mayor to make that decision, then the $44,000, that needs to be increased. That's pretty easy. If you want to fund it for 12 months, the number is $88,000. You're basically, doubling that number. I can provide those figures for you so that when you make your reductions, it makes sense. So I have a sense of, if you're saying I'm going to reduce it by 20 grand and you don't know what that means, then I'd like to at least provide those figures for you.
Councilor Caddy.
Yeah, I think what I want is, the Collins Group gave us their findings. I think what I want is similar to what Councilor Bean was saying earlier. They're saying that we need to streamline the process. They said that staff is technically competent. They want us to invest in Munis.
Councilor, could you speak up?
They want us to invest in Munis. They're talking about training. We've been talking about training. You've been talking about training, and there has been no training. That doesn't seem like a real big one to me. There's a need for the departments to submit their projects beforehand. And there's need for departments to estimate annual needs and submit one request versus multiple throughout the year. On March 3rd of this year, I sent you and John Barrett an email. Lenny Laxo had submitted proposals for crack sealing on 12/26/14, line painting on 11/19/14, tree cutting February 2nd of 15, and paving on March 12th of 15. I wrote this at the end of March. He had been waiting for 4 months on one, 5 months on another, 2 months on another, and 2 weeks or 3 weeks after the other. If you look at these requests, these are requests that he puts in for every year. Crack sealing, line painting, tree cutting, and paving. That's what they're talking about in this. I don't know whose job it is, if it's yours or if it's purchasing or if it's the commissioners, but if you were to ask me right now, I could tell you next year we're going to need all 4 of those again. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like rocket science to figure out a schedule like this. And then lastly, and I know that we've been doing a little bit of this, but not enough, there's a need to put in place multi-year contracts or even one-year contracts with 2 one-year renewals versus short-term contracts. Again, I hate to think that we have to go out to a COO to figure this out. I don't think it's that difficult. But what I don't want to see after this budget is none of this being done. It seems to me this is very important. And I think that if you can start taking away some of the problems piece by piece, I think that you could make purchasing a lot more effective.
Could I comment on that?
Absolutely.
So last year was the first time that we asked department heads to submit ahead of time. So if 100% of the departments submit 100% of their projects on July 1st, then obviously some are going to have to wait 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. So it's not necessarily the wait time per se, it's the scheduling it so that there's a consistent amount of work each month if you have consistent staffing. So the issue with the crack ceiling is not so much did it take 4 months, but was it supposed to take 4 months? So was the time slot to get crack sealing the right time? Did it get done in May because April there was more important and pressing things to do? February there's more important and pressing things to do. The way that we're manually doing it right now, it's difficult to make that decision because each project, how do you right size each of the projects each month? How do you make sure that February has the same workload as March has the same work as April? We looked at doing it from a dollar amount. The problem is the dollar amount does not correlate to the amount of hours. So we started working with the procurement staff to look at each individual project and say, can we guesstimate the staff hours it's going to take to do each one? And the problem with that is that that's very difficult to do. The fluctuation in staff hours, as we've seen, again, this is I don't know every single project, but where I've been micromanaging, the increase in staff hours has typically fallen on the department. If a project is submitted correctly, then let's say it could take 28 man hours. If it's submitted incorrectly, then it takes 48 man hours, but those 48 man hours are spread over weeks or months versus a 1 or 2 week period. And
that's your training. That's where we're lacking the training.
Well, can I speak to that?
Of course you can.
Because I've tried. This is not for lack of throwing my hands up. The training that I found is needed is not in procurement. If you have a good scope of services, then you can go and procure that. The problem that we've had is that the scope of services is incorrect. The chief procurement officer cannot write a scope of services. The chief procurement officer can say, I think that you're trying to fix something at the wastewater plant. If the wastewater department doesn't submit something that makes any sense, the chief procurement officer doesn't have the time or the expertise to do what an engineer or what a person is supposed to do. When I started off as mayor, we had 0 engineers in the city. Now we have half a dozen. So we have done better, and that's been deliberate, that's been...
I think you misunderstood me. The training isn't for purchasing. The training is for the department heads.
Yes.
That's where, if they send something in wrong and it gets held up, the training should be the department heads with purchasing,
Yeah.
so that and to make the short forms, to make it easier, to make that was one of the second ones they.
Could I? Because I think you might be misunderstanding. It's to deal with the scope of services is not about what form to fill out. A scope of services is actually to define your project. So if you can't define your project, we can't buy it. We can't contract it. So each project that comes it's new. Like the airport is not trained in building terminals. They're not trained in expanding. It is all new to them. Each of these, we haven't built a new municipal building in a while. So for me to train the airport and say, this is how you design a building, is not kind of a uniform training that comes down the line. What we've been doing is that like I've been spending a lot of time with wastewater issues. A lot of the time that I spend on wastewater issues is to try to first sign an agreement with the federal government so that we don't end up losing millions of dollars. And then working with right-sizing the staff there, because we didn't have the right staff there. We had staff in DPW doing what wastewater should have done, and vice versa. We had union issues. We didn't have engineers. We had changeover in staff. We had maintenance issues. We had all sorts of, and then we had the CSO projects. So my goal was for us to meet each of the CSO deadlines. So the training of the staff to be able to meet those CSO deadlines, here are a couple of the problems. So I can't tell you what is needed. I can't say, you need to fix this, you need to change this, you need this. I need a deputy wastewater manager or deputy water manager to say that. We don't necessarily have that. So if a department head doesn't come forward ahead of time and know that something needs to be fixed, then that can throw the entire procurement office. If, and this is one of the things that delayed one of the projects, if a deputy procures expensive engineering services and then has those engineering services then bid on the project, we have a major issue there. If the engineering services goes down the road with a project and doesn't necessarily tell me, even if I ask them that they're doing it, and procure it as a service project instead of a capital project, that might delay a project by 6 to 8 weeks because they've initially done it wrong. They've made that assumption. So we've been trying to train people on this is service, this is capital, this is, but it is project by project by project. So one of the things that we're thinking about is not only having all of the projects be given to my department ahead of time so we can plan it. We are trying to then institute a new policy in which every single step has to be approved by myself and legal and procurement, which takes a lot of time, but it prevents those kinds of errors that have happened before. Like the school departments tried to get a ceiling, a big room painted. They didn't dictate the paint color, the size of the building. They had no provisions on timeline, and they had no provisions because it was lead paint. Think about a paint project. Nancy, myself, I can't write that scope. The school department, if they want something painted, it is up to them to say what the paint color is, what the timeline is, what the what the sizes are, and all of it. They actually have to estimate, the amount of paint, because if somebody is going to bid on painting something, you're going to have painter A estimate differently than painter B and then painter C, and you're going to have people give you prices that are not apples to apples. And that's just a painting project. Imagine when that happens on an $8 million wastewater or water project. So these are the kinds of things that are happening right now. And it does rely on me working with department heads and not just saying, you do something wrong, you're fired, that's it. It's working with them to say, why are you doing this wrong? Do you not have an engineer? What specifically are you not trained in? What are you so overwhelmed with crises that you don't have time to step back and pre-plan the projects moving forward? So that's the nuances of how it operates behind the scenes.
I want to just read an email that was before the thing I read earlier. I addressed this to John, Lisa, and Lenny. Hi, Lenny. I'm concerned about several specs being held in purchasing for months. These are the items that we request every year. I've been contracting for 30 years. The time to get a good price is early in the season. When you wait until it gets busy, the price gets higher because all the good contractors are already scheduled. They will fit you in, but for a price. This is not a good business practice, and situations like this cost the city a lot of money. And I still stand by that statement, that things that are coming in every year that you need to do, and if you wait till the last minute, all the contractors are going to be scheduled somewhere else, and you're going to pay the premium for that job. And I've seen it happen here a couple times.
But at what expense?
These are the issues that I'm talking about, that when someone puts in an application and it's wrong, purchasing or yourself needs to be on the telephone with them right away and say, listen, we have to meet. We got to straighten this out, and sit down with them and get them through the situation so that it doesn't get held up and cost the city more money. In business, I have to do that.
But that's a first come, first serve. If crack ceiling got delayed 4 months, because in those 4 months, we had to meet a CSO deadline each of those months, or we had to take advantage of a playground or a streetscape project. The report does detail that we've had unusual circumstances. Moving City Hall was complex. Getting last-minute steam line, streetscape, and playground projects during these months in the past have been a problem. The CSO project, we just signed that agreement a few years ago. Not even, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. that is unusual circumstances. We've had an increase not only in procurement activities, but major ones, complex ones, and ones that have deadlines with financial penalties. I'm feeling and seeing the difference the last 2 or 3 years than when I first started. So I can't necessarily compare apples and oranges, is to say that sometimes when these crises happen, and I would say the procurement folks have been able to step up. We haven't had a disaster in terms of meeting the deadlines to move out of City Hall or meeting the CSO deadlines. We haven't had to turn away a playground, a streetscape, or demolition grants. We haven't had to do that. We've been meeting it. But the crises right now, the inconsistent projects outweigh the consistent ones. So if I have staff, a limited staff, what we need to do is I need to have them continue to do the projects. I'm not going to take them off a CSO project to say we need to schedule these things. I'm going to put John on it. I'm going to put myself on it. We're going to put others on it. If these last 2 years of data, which are different than the first 6 years that I've been here, I don't know if those are going to change. I don't know if 4 years, 6 years. The projects you're talking about, those are going to be consistent, but those are such a small fraction of the man hours and the dollars compared to all of these other projects that we do. So I'm just letting you know that we're going to do the best that we can to minimize those things. But if we cut the time of something that's only 5% in half, then we create that 2.5% efficiency. That might be great. But if we're going to cut the staff by 25% or 30%, 2.5% efficiency is not enough. So I need to make those decisions in the next 6 months to say, what are the things that are going to create the most efficiencies? And I think that the plan that I had outlined to Councillor Green is probably the best thing to do. And it does include trying to right-size some of the staffing and trying to schedule some of those projects beforehand.
Thank you.
Councillor Kuchmarek.
Madam Mayor, thanks for being here tonight. I guess I'll address this in 2 different points. We've been speaking about kind of purchasing staff. So I'll agree with Councilor Caddy. I think we need to use technology to the best of our ability. We need to invest in training, empower the department heads to make things as efficient as possible when they're being streamlined to purchasing. Ultimately, we can't and we shouldn't be micromanaging. I'd like to think that the department head, a COO, or a mayor would be saying, we have a problem, the results are unacceptable, we need to get from A to B, and here's how I believe the best course of action is, whether that's technology, whether that's consulting, training, etc. It seems like the Collins Center has given us some good guidance as to how they're advising you to proceed, which is technology and some training. So with regards to the staffing end, I guess I'll second what Councilor DiNatale recommended, which is, absolutely we shouldn't. It would be foolish to have a department head, doing clerical day-to-day activities. Let's fill the clerical position and have a full-time procurement officer for both the city and the school side. With the second point, the discussion of the COO, I'm actually happy that you brought this topic before us. I think I like the direction of a COO in its essence, in that we're adding an extra layer at the top. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think this is broad enough as a COO, because I think it's too finite in its scope of looking at both at just IT and purchasing. I think it should oversee kind of a vast array of the departments, whether it's the 15 or 20 different department heads and subdivisions. Essentially a chief of staff, or COO, however you're labeling it, and that the position would establish kind of clear lines of communications, a report structure, hold departments accountable, focus on coordination, cooperation of departments and divisions. So I like the fact that you brought this up about how to structure. I look at this as, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. We all need to surround ourselves with the talent and skill to complement our skill set and and our weaknesses. If we have problems today in IT and purchasing, we could just as easily 5 years down the road, have issues in public safety or public works if we had different department heads or different resources. So we should be proactive in realizing that any position we add to the structure shouldn't be, reactive and saying we have a problem today, so we should just add a new layer to fixate on those two departments. It should be flexible enough and versatile enough to be able to adapt to, where are the areas of weakness that we have today, and how can that same position help us in our areas of weakness tomorrow. Honestly, I'd like to see something that can address, multiple departments, but also add assistance at the upper layer that can help kind of pull all the department heads together, whether that's getting a meeting, focusing on organizing the various task forces. And lastly, I'll second something else that Councilor DiNatale brought up, which was, the timing. Well, I think this is the right kind of direction to be moving, and the timing is tough in that, be adding someone who's essentially, working right next to the mayor. I think that's difficult to hire someone as one mayor is leaving and a new mayor will be moving in. I'd love to see whatever that future direction, whether it is a COO or chief of staff or none of the above. But if we're adding a position at this level, that we, provide funding to get us through, the transition, but leave some flexibility to allow that next mayor to decide, how to fill that position.
Could I just make some comments? Absolutely. So you'd referred to sort of the transition. I think if I had more time to do this, then I would have sort of left things as it was and do more study before providing a budget that made such drastic changes. Though I did hear a lot of calls for drastic changes, and this allows you to keep things the same, but it also allows you to change things. This is an attempt to depoliticize the operations, even though I agree that a mayor could be, and in many ways should be, the COO. A full-time COO or a full-time operations person with overarching authority over all departments, as you said, more broad, is a good idea to have and to depoliticize, because the mayors don't always have that skill set. It would be great to have every mayor coming in with the COO skill set, but we are a CEO first and foremost. I'm a CFO second, doing the budgeting and so on. It's also my skill set. A COO is something that I would say is third on my list of things, but is also something that is missing in the city. Other cities, smaller, have addressed this different ways, and I've actually thought about doing this. There's some mayors who have been able to enhance the operations piece by having two staff like we do. But instead of, for example, Nada in my office is paid $40-something thousand as sort of that assistant and a chief of staff. They pay somebody between $65,000 and $75,000. They bring in a greater skill set, and they call them the chief administrative officer. So it's part of their two people, but what they do is they raise the skill sets of the two staffers so that it's not just the mayor. Because right now I have two staff that are paid $40,000 or in that range. That's not enough to attract somebody who has operational skill sets. And though I'd like to say, every mayor ahead of me will, I think it is a good discussion to have to say, for a city this size, who has operational overreach? Right now it's just the mayor. The mayor is also the chief executive, the CFO, the school committee, you name it. So I think what you're saying is that you're talking about a broad overreach. I think that is worth exploring. I tried to begin to broach the conversation here, not meaning to say that my way is the right way and I'm going to impose this on the future mayor, but this is something to think of. And maybe we take the time now where we do homework for the next 6 months, allow a new mayor to adjust, and that new mayor can make a decision that has much more data in next year's budget cycle.
Councilor DiNatale.
I'd like to make a recommendation that $82,500 be cut from chief operating officer, chief procurement officer, 9 months, and $44,305 from chief procurement officer, 6 months.
Councilor Bean.
I get a chance to meet with purchasing agents throughout the country and just some best practices, mayors, that I see that maybe the city can implement is using cooperative purchasing agreements or using state contracts, GSA contracts. Sometimes multiple communities will come together. The cities used to do it with Fitchburg Garden Limited to buy police cars, oil, salt.
Yeah.
I think the more and more we can do what other cities are doing to lessen the load would be good. I think there are best practices out there. The other thing is that, as you mentioned, the terminal project. I mean, we're not the only city doing a terminal, not the only airport. So the other, I think there are 4 others or 5 others with the same size terminal,
Yeah.
or whatever it was. But I mean, those cities are also preparing RFPs. It's very common for cities to use other cities' RFPs to work on. So I just think we just got to take what's there for free and take advantage of it, and you could really reduce the workload. I mean, it's the best practice among most cities is using what's out there. There's no copyright on these RFPs, and a lot of times, sometimes the manufacturers will have them from other cities. You know, we don't want something from the company, but they'll have other cities that have put out RFPs that have gone through the procurement practice, and sometimes in Massachusetts, depending on how many cities adopt it, you can piggyback on it. But there are a lot of opportunities I think the city has that we may not have taken advantage of that could help smooth the operation, make it a lot easier for department heads. And I just think we got to, step up the game on this.
Could I comment on that?
Sure.
So one of the things that we don't have data on, but just from my past year experience, is that the percentage of projects that would fall under a cooperative agreement is probably between 10 and 20%. So by cutting that in half, for example, and then by having 3-year contracts versus 1, you could maybe save 10 to 15% of your operation. So that could be a chunk here. So I think that that's a good idea. Where my time has been spent is to get projects to the point where they can be procured. Before a project can go before procurement, we have to chase the politics, chase the funding, put together the project, make sure we have the staff right. So you know that there's a lot of work. Right. A project doesn't materialize, and then all I do is make sure it goes through procurement. It is a lot of work to lobby, to sit down at the table, to negotiate, to bring that project to fruition. That's where the majority of my time has been. So I've been lacking on the tail end because I've been feeding projects to procurement with departments, but then not overseeing. So that's created that particular bottleneck. The airport terminal project, though, and all the projects that have come before there, even if we had a pro forma project, the issues that exist with that project, as detailed in the review and in my experience, are separate and before purchasing. So when I asked for the airport to give me projects a year ago, they gave me none. I followed up and asked for projects, they gave me none. And I knew those projects were in the pipeline. I didn't know if they were going to happen this year or next year or so on. I did, because we've been working on them all 8 years that I've been here. When they came, it was, we need it done yesterday. We already started the process. The problem is they started the process incorrectly. It's Beverly, and it's a Cape, and it's us. The state experimented and messed up with the process. So they came up with, they tried to procure a single architect to design 3 buildings. And it is being delayed in the other communities because this experiment is not working very well to try to procure the same terminal building. So this, even though it sounds great in theory, it's great. We're doing 3 at once. We're the test case, a lot of issues coming to light. So, I mean, I can go into that in more detail, but I will say that in theory, it makes sense to grab stuff off the shelf with the state. At the same time, we've also had staff who are technically competent who've done the due diligence and said, whoa, the state just did something wrong. And then we're seeing that the other 2 communities are also delaying their projects because of that.
Councilor Beazle.
I guess it's a concern of mine is when we start talking about positions, I know that everyone keeps saying that, this didn't get approved, that didn't get approved. And presently right now, if you look at the way that this is set up, we have 2 people full-time, at least in the procurement department. So that's at least 24 months. The other gentleman, it looked as if he was going to the school department. And yet, we're thinking about replacing them with somebody who's going to not only run procurement, but oversee IT for 9 months and have a procurement office, so for 6 months, that's 15 months. It just seems to me that we're struggling now to get procurement done, and yet we're cutting back the amount of months that people are actually doing procurement. So it doesn't make any sense to me that when we review this, that we make sure that we're, if we're struggling now, we need to at least keep the status quo so that, the new person comes in can at least get caught up to where everybody is. Because it almost seems like we're struggling now, but we're talking about cutting back staff. It really doesn't make any sense unless we have, certainly the new mayor comes in and analyzes the whole situation. So, thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilor Dintelli?
I have a question for you, Mr. President. Is this a discussion for everything on page 51?
51. I would expect that the mayor will be getting to the IT component,
Oh, okay.
but I was going to ask her next.
Okay, before we go there,
Yep.
Councilor Caddy was reading some messages, and the comments tonight I consider to be a lot of fluff, because the airport was mentioned. Without naming names, there was an assessment made by the administration when the Airport Commission appealed to us for help. The administration gave a predictable response that it was their fault. And the commissioners then came back and said, we disagree. The airport, without naming names, gave me a timeline going back to July of 2014 on Hangar 7 and Terminal Building Project. And throughout this whole timeline, there's bullets that say no response, automated response. I can't take this right now, I got to do this instead. Why does it require a COO to ascertain that problem and fix it? Communication? I know I'm going to get a response that says, well, that's not the case, but you know what? I am reading verbatim what's sent to me. Either these people are on cloud 9 or there really is a problem here, okay? No communication, little communication, and this is frequent throughout. But a COO is going to fix this. Why does it take someone at 110,000 a year to say, if you get something in your email or a phone call, you respond? That was July of last year. The status today, still don't know what's going on. So we're going on almost a year. So I got this email where the commission says that they disagree with the assessment. And furthermore, they say that they are very frustrated with what's been going on, and the tenant is threatening to leave, and they honestly do not I understand the mayor's email and feedback. However, here's a good example of some of our attempts to communicate, highlight a problem, and move things along. You might find it of interest that it was not responded to by anyone. So we can go on and on with this. I am not trying to badmouth anybody. I am trying to highlight my frustration with years of the same complaints, and yet the response is that it's a one-sided response that continues. This isn't even having to do with technology. This doesn't have to do with Munis. This has to do with communicating. So I am very interested to hear what's going to be said right now to counter this. But I'll just say it right now. I believe every single person who's wrote me these emails, because as I said before, it's like they're reading from a play script. Either they're all in cahoots and they're lying to us, or we're not getting the real story. And given our track record here, I'm willing to bet we're not getting the real story. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, would you like to respond to that? But I was also
Yes.
going to ask if you would move on to the IT portion of page 51, so we could have a little discussion about
Absolutely.
that.
I think in general, I want to make sure that I've never made the assertion that the COO is a solution. I don't even know if we're going to have a COO. And I believe that a lot of these issues we've been trying to solve without a COO. So I just want to make sure that I've never said the COO is a panacea to all these problems. The airport terminal project and other projects that we've had issues with, they have yet to provide a scope of services. That is the department. So I just want to hesitate from saying that it's procurement's issue. If, to this date, a project is not done and they're blaming procurement and a scope of services does not exist and there's been attempts by myself and legal and procurement and other helpful department heads who have reached out and said, we will help you develop scope of services, which we all have evidence to, then it is not procurement's problem. It is my problem as the chief executive that I have a department that is continuing to defy and blame others and wants to get a project done that is under their purview and has yet to have a scope of services. A scope of services can't fix it.
Could we move on to the IT portion of page 51 then?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In the budget, I did not touch the IT expenses or the technology services too much. I have made some minor adjustments by decreasing some of the amounts requested. So IT contracted services is $125,000. I actually have a line item of $125,000 worth of contracted services. I still cut that by 10 because I said I understand that these are the existing contracts, these are the existing contract increases, but I still want you to try to do better and decrease that by 10. In terms of the staffing, there are 2 FTEs. I've maintained those 2 FTEs. A year ago, we tried to get a full-time help desk technician. I'm asking for a combined clerical, not a help desk technician at this point in time. This was submitted before the Collins Center report was done, which they do recommend the lower level help. I think anything will help. I don't think that in this budget we can provide enough of the lower level help to get the IT back on track. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to at least try to get clerical so that we can take some of that load off of the 2 existing staff. And we're going to work to see if there are other funding sources and or interns that we can use at this point in time. Should that not prove enough, then you will see from myself or a future mayor a request for more services. But this is right now what's in here, and hopefully this will be enough to sustain so that the next mayor can make a decision on IT. The handout that I gave, you can ignore the COO, CPO if that's something that you don't want to fund, but I do believe the IT steering committee is a really great idea that was recommended because you don't want me steering IT on everything they should do, and we don't want to have the old system of first come, first serve. So that is something that I would look to implement right away. It's not a formal committee for the ordinance, so if I appoint people who have expertise and somebody else wants to change those out later, they can do that. But I do like the idea of bringing people who actually have more IT experience or the end users and creating a steering committee to actually look at the expenses and the IT services and help figure out how to spend those dollars. I think what we may do is we may do a zero-based budgeting. So the 129.5 and the 217, right now if we left that alone, our IT staff could spend that all. The IT steering committee would come in, look at the IT plan, create a new plan, sort of zero-based, and then match that up against the IT manager's plan, and then we would have to make some decisions and or potentially find some cost savings or do things differently. So I don't want to make any guarantees on that each of these are specifically what they are. The IT manager can answer you specifically and say, I can tell you exactly what the dues and subscriptions are, I can tell you exactly what the training is, I can tell you exactly what the IT contracted services are, because they're proposing something that's very similar to last year with contracted increases. So he can tell you what his particular plan would be, but I'm also letting you know that I really like the idea of the IT steering committee. That committee may change what you might hear tonight.
Councilor Di Natale.
This document in our hands that does a comparison between all the other cities and towns, like the attempt made last year, it leaves out two critical costs that no one ever wants to address, and that's the benefits. So this document is supposed to convince all of you that we are spending way less on IT than anyone else, and therefore we don't have to make a change. But it does not tell you the millions of dollars that we saddle ourselves with for 35 years of full-time employment. So, with that said, number one, I won't believe any of these numbers until I physically get them from the cities themselves. Number two, the audit that was conducted has no merit to me whatsoever because the audit firm themselves testified that they were told not to focus on cost, which was the only onus behind my wanting the audit done for IT. And if anyone here says that that wasn't made clear, then they weren't listening. And the reason why that wasn't told for them to do is because the evidence would be damning. It would show us that we are spending way more than cities and towns who do not do what we do. Number two, if you do a baseline analysis of 2 full-time employees for information technology, this only is a case-by-case basis. There are some positions that you could look at privatizing. There are others that you shouldn't because of the measurements and all that stuff involved in it. But for this particular matter, and this isn't based on any particular salary or any particular person. This is just a schedule. And I got the health insurance costs from Mr. Saracen for what the majority of employees here sign up for per year. So the assumption model that I created, and this isn't, you don't have to take my word for it. I can send you the file. It's very simple math. For 2 full-time people, let's say the director makes $80,000 and the systems admin makes $60,000. Then you add in the longevity, the clothing allowances, and then you add in the expenses that we're spending right now per year, which is around $300,000, $308,000. I'm just using this year's budget proposal. And it comes to $450,000. You extrapolate that cost out 35 years, and you put some assumptions into it. You put inflation costs, you increase the budget for expenses by 2% per year, you factor in salary increases every couple of years, step raises, you factor in health insurance costs between 5 and 10% a year, and when all is said and done after 35 years of employing 2 people, the cost to the city would be $30 million. $30 million bucks. The total salary over a 35-year period is $5.9 million. The expenses would be $15.4 million. And then you add in the health care during the 35 years of employment, $350,000. And then the health care for 30 years of retirement, $2.4 million. And the pension at 80% upon retirement, $5.4 million for 30 years. So you get the $30 million. If you were to privatize, using all that $450 for a private company, and let's just say we use $550, okay? At the same budget we're at now, the total cost over 35 years would be $22.5 million, a difference of $6.865 million, $7 million bucks. But what do I know? They're just numbers. So we're going to get documents like this. They're going to tell everybody here that we get the best bang for our buck when we don't. The audit was not conducted to look at costs for obvious reasons, because it wouldn't show what the city wanted it to show. And lastly, we have been told several years that if we do this, all hell's going to break loose with information technology. Has all hell breaking loose in Gardner? Has all hell breaking loose in Lunenburg, in Leominster, and all the other cities? I think I read it, 142 communities do it. Somehow their computers still run. Somehow their cell phones still work. Somehow their telephones still operate. I am tired of the superlatives. I'm sick of it. So I'm just going to present the numbers here tonight. This is just a simple model. The model is supposed to explain to people what the cost savings are over a long period of time if you just use assumptions that aren't far off the mark. But they're a case-by-case basis. Obviously, I don't advocate we privatize everywhere, but this is one area that's ripe for it. And when the mayor tells us every year that OPEB is a huge problem, my problem has always been no one in this room, nobody, has been able to, A, refute the numbers that I've provided, or explain why, concretely, we don't make a change. It's always been about personal feelings. That's all it's ever been about, and that's never what it's been about for me. It's about saving money. That's all it's about. So I am going to make a recommendation, and I don't know if it's going to pass. Probably not, but I tend to repeat myself often. To reduce the IT manager in 3 quarters, fund them at 3 months. And that would be reduce the IT manager's salary by $59,894 and the systems administrator at $46,767. And I want to emphasize it again because I'm sure someone here tonight's going to say that I'm a cold-hearted jerk, but it has nothing to do with people in this case. It's about dealing with a liability that we don't have money for and looking at what other cities and towns do with models that worked and make a change. I'm not advocating this be done citywide, but this is one area that I've been focusing on because it's so blatantly clear what we could do differently. But if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass, but I figured I'd give it another shot. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Please, someone let me know if I've ever used the term "all hell will break loose." I don't think I've ever used that term,
I didn't say
especially
she said it.
with regards to the budget or IT. All hell's not going to break loose. I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to do the best that we can. I thought about whether if the crime analyst whose assistant administrator was still the crime analyst and the IT manager was still the GIS person, these are already vested staff. We can't even really, you can't even make decisions like this publicly by talking about those kinds of things. That's HIPAA, that's talking about individual staff member. But if 2 individuals are already vested and then their job performance changes to not only cover what they did before but more, you have to look at the added value. So if they're already vested, then they're already going to incur health insurances. They're already going to do it whether you outsource that or not. So to look at something like this is incredibly complex. I would be happy to take all the time in the world you want to do that kind of financial analysis. Same thing with comparing to other communities. There's no intent to deceive here. Every community is different in terms of their IT needs. I would hate to make a decision just because some are doing more and some are doing less. We would have to do an extensive IT survey. The lack of Collins Center doing an IT cost survey, I do not like the implication that I told them not to look at costs. I didn't tell them anything of the sort. I told them to do as much as they can. They stated here at this table that to do a cost analysis would be much more expensive. I think it would be 50 grand or more is the cost that they would have that they've done before. If you want to do that, we can certainly do that, but it was definitely not meant to deceive. So as much as it's always entertaining for words to be put in my mouth, I would like to just say that there's no way that I can have a constructive debate here. I'd be happy to do all of the numbers, give you all of the information so that you can make an informed decision and that I can do the best I can to manage the operations of the city. I made the decision to take 2 existing staff already vested, ask them to do more because I thought we're already paying for them. If they're doing this and I create an IT staff with just incremental more, it was cheaper than outsourcing. It was cheaper than hiring new staff. It was the cheapest and most productive way to do it. But that's my own analysis. You can agree or disagree. But moving forward, it's also up to you. If you want to reduce the staff, then we can look at outsourcing. But frankly, I would recommend that you wait until the new mayor, and I would be happy to develop all the RFPs. I would be happy to do whatever investigative stuff that you need, but then leave that for the next mayor to make that kind of drastic decision.
Councilor Boschman.
May I have a question about IT and purchasing? If the city went into a new system of Munich's, because according to that report, they're supposed to work very closely with purchasing, would they be able to handle Munich's as a whole? Because I noticed on the city solicitor side, you cut a line item of $5,000 because he used to do that work. Would they be able to handle Munich?
I'm going to oversimplify it. The handling of Munis as it currently stands, because we've done almost no upgrades. We haven't added modules. We don't do any in-house technical assistance. the handling of Munis right now is essentially setting up people's username and passcodes. If they forget their passcode, we change their passcodes. If they have a question, we give them the Munis number. We also schedule downtime for when it needs to catch up. And we are doing an upgrade to a newer version, not newer modules. We have to coordinate with departments on when it's going to shut down. So it's saying, okay, you treasurer, when do you need it down? Oh, you can't have it down in May. What about June? All right, auditor, you can't do it in June. What about July? So that's kind of coordination that our IT staff is more than capable of doing. The purchase of Munis modules comes with training. There's an operational cost there. Our IT staff has been involved with attending the meetings with the Munis staff, looking at the modules, looking at the training. They understand it. They can provide that hands-on technical assistance because not all staff uses Munis in that kind of way, in the operational way. We use it in a financial way, which is different than the operational way. Now you're going to introduce a lot of different departments to an online system that they're not used to, and they're not doing it every month. When you're using Munis for staffing or for finances, you're kind of doing the same thing every month. So the technical assistance is down. So with the new system, you are correct in that the technical assistance will increase dramatically. We would look at having trainings. So that would be part of the purchase module. And because the IT has already kind of been through the presentations and would go through the trainings, they are more than capable of helping people through whatever technical things they need. I've seen it myself. It's meant to be somewhat intuitive. It's just it's more intuitive than a form because it's all fill-in data and it's all automated.
Now, one other question. I don't know what you're going to say there. The library. I noticed they have an IT person over the library, and according to the report, all work that needs to be done by IT should be handled by IT themselves, not have an IT over here person, a different person over here that doesn't even belong with IT, and one over here, and one over here, and one behind me. Are we gonna, if we change the system and we go by this Rick Collins report, are we gonna be doing that at the library too?
Yeah. So the Collins Center report says that they don't want the existing high-level staff to do the kind of work that is being done at the library. When you're there helping patrons log on and fixing a computer, that is the low-level work that they're saying they don't want these guys to do. Okay. So that adheres to the Collins Center report. What the Collins Center report says is that not that these two guys physically do everything, it's that they need to have strategic oversight over everything. So therefore, they want the library person to report to the IT staff, not that the IT staff should do that low-level work and hang around the library and help people turn on their computers or fix their computers or search for things. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I get that. All right, thank you.
Councilor Green.
Again, I appreciate having scenarios and things to compare to, but I do think that it's important that on the paper that we were handed that, again, I want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So when I see things, you know, Fitchburg's IT department currently manages 23 servers, 190 plus workstations, 16 separate locations, 13 connections to police cruisers, 12 copiers, 95 cell data connections and devices, phone lines for police, fire, municipal offices. They maintain mugshots, fingerprint equipment, and state communications, employee trainings, employee identification badges, building security, cable negotiations, GIS mapping, emergency operations coordination, future planning, economic development, budgeting. And then I see that IT is involved in every aspect of how the city operates, from the airport, you know, cemetery, fire, library, schools, treasure, wastewater, water. That's a huge amount of work, I think, and I'm not computer savvy. I know nothing about IT, but I do want to make sure that it's important that if we're comparing the numbers where we have comparison of Beverly and Everett to Fitchburg, or to Holyoke and Leominster to Fitchburg, that we are taking all of that other stuff into consideration. Thank you.
Any other comments for the mayor regarding the page 51, purchasing, IT, and chief operating officer, chief procurement officer? Council Beazall.
Council President, hey, I was wondering if I could ask Mr. Benair a question.
The mayor is making the presentation.
Okay.
But it would be up to the mayor.
Absolutely, especially if it pertains to one of the technical issues. So if I could ask
Yep.
Mr. Benia to join me.
So, I know that the website software is no longer supported. How, like, is there any other software that we presently have in the city that's antiquated, that's no longer supported?
Yes, sir. Do you want the list?
Yeah, if you could,
The SCADA system at the water department is going to be critical in the next year. There's going to be a lot of work required to rebuild that, redesign it, and go out to bid on a big, big project. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. The phone system at the fire department is the last major phone system that needs to be replaced. That's something that's going to have to come up in the next year, I would imagine. The web page redesign would be a major one, and then the procurement modules from Munis would be the other major jobs that need to be done in the next year.
okay. How many additional workstations do you think we're going to be needing? If we're going to have require departments to do Munis, are we gonna have to upgrade additional work?
No, we're keeping up with the machines. Unfortunately, with the cuts last year, we could not buy as many machines as we wanted for replacement. I think a lot of communities or a lot of IT departments try to do a 3-year turnaround of every machine. We're not even making a 4-year turnaround now with the cuts. I saved my money until the very end of this year and bought machines, but there's just not as many as there usually is for the year. So it's not going to show now, but it will show in the next 2 years if we continue down this road.
Okay. And just a question to the mayor. Do we offer presently educational reimbursement if we have associates that are working for us that want to go and learn Excel and Word and all that stuff? Do we already have that in place?
There's a training budget in each department. So whether a department chooses to get trained in, like, for example, public health issue in the Board of Health or in a specific skill set, that's been up to them. But we've identified a need, and I think we need to go department by department to develop minimum skill sets. Part of the issue that we've run into in the past, I just want to mention union contracts. We had this in other departments where union contracts did not dictate that people know Microsoft Office, and we had people push back against using it. So it's not as easy as saying, I'm going to send everybody to training and they're suddenly going to look at it. So we're looking at it from an operational standpoint. I personally would like to, and we have, put it in every job description. So as we've hired new people, it's been part of the job description. But sometimes you have folks that have been there for a while and it's harder to force them to use the technology, especially if it's related to a union issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Moving forward, we will go to the Fitchburg Public Schools. Superintendent Ravenel.
Thank you, Chairman Hay.
Good evening, gentlemen.
City councilors, thanks. Good to be here tonight. If I may, as in the past, the one thing I usually do is read the cover letter.
Yep.
So that folks at home kind of get a context of what we're doing. Dear school committee and Fitchburg City Council members, next month I complete 1 decade as superintendent of the Fitchburg Public Schools. In these years, I, along with a wonderful team of professional administrators and teachers, have worked to make the Fitchburg Public Schools a point of pride for the community, our parents, and our students. We accomplished this by upgrading most of our facilities, increasing academic rigor throughout the district, beginning with a free all-day kindergarten program, advancing academic opportunities for all students with an honors academy in grades K to 4, an advanced STEM program in our middle schools, and a commitment to challenging coursework at the high school, exemplified by the Honors Academy Compact between Fitchburg High School and Fitchburg State University, as well as quadrupling participation in advanced placement courses. Beyond academics, the pride is back on the Red Raider playing fields with a full offering of free middle school sports, which are not only providing students with lessons in teamwork and leadership, but developing the skills of a strong feeder program for Fitchburg High School athletics. Similarly, on the fine arts stage, we mark our 3rd year of resurrecting the high school musical with this year's successful performance of The Wizard of Oz, as well as a growing band and music program. This and much more was celebrated at the first annual Fitchburg Public School Gala and in the many awards, recognitions, honors received by our students and staff throughout the year, which are too many to list, but most of which you have received in my regular emails. All of this has been accomplished within the bounds of net school spending and the collaboration and contributions of the city leadership, other departments, and the many organizations we partner with each year to provide the most comprehensive educational experience possible to all Fitchburg students. Fitchburg Public Schools are on the rise, as are test scores and college acceptances, while the dropout rate is now lower than the state average for the first time in decades. Our students are being educated in classrooms with excellent technology, and they have access to state-of-the-art technology through multiple distributions of handheld devices. We anticipate approval of our E-Rate wireless network upgrade to our school's information technology backbone. This upgrade will allow staff and students to access more video and high bandwidth services. While the school department has accomplished much, several major challenges remain ahead. We have engaged an architectural firm to assist the school department to create a strategic facility use plan. This plan will review our current facilities portfolio capabilities and our students' needs. This plan will also incorporate input of many stakeholders, and it is a key step as we plan to approach MSBA for support of a facilities project when the city's borrowing window of opportunity opens in the very near future. Continuing to provide the quality leadership, professional development, and resources to move every school to Level 1 status achieved by Crocker and McKay Arts Academy. And continue to find ways to create a sustainable funding environment through review of best practices and service delivery in the most effective and efficient manner. The school department must be willing to adapt to a changing funding and competitive environment in which a new administration is overseeing public education at the state level, declining grant funding, increased needs of economically disadvantaged students, and a multiple of unfunded mandates. I believe challenges bring opportunities, and in that light, I bring you this budget with a message of pride, optimism, and my continued commitment to the Fitchburg Public Schools, the city, and its citizens. So what you have before you, as you have in the past, is a series of documents, and there's a section at the beginning, and a budget narrative. Each school, we ask every school to talk about where they're at and what's going on in their school, what are their priorities, what are their accomplishments, what do they hope to do. And then there's a PowerPoint presentation that I made to the school committee, and then a Munis budget. And the Munis budget attempts to put the 50,200,000 in categories. And one of the things that I've said in the past, and is still true, is that as we move through this cycle of the year, while the bottom line will not change because of retirements, people moving, people coming in and out, some of those numbers can move from one school to another depending on where the needs are. So I'm ready to answer any questions about any part of this document, and whatever I can't answer, I brought Bob here to take over, and if it's related to policy or overall budget, Mr. Stevens is willing to do that on behalf of the school committee. So I'm open to any and all questions you might have.
Councilor Bean.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you to the Superintendent, and thank you for your 10 years of service, and we've seen the progress that you and the staff have made in the school committee. You know, the budget is one thing, and again, as a city councilor, again, most of the hard work is done at the school committee level and that, and we have very limited what we can do at the council. But recently, we've been kind of inundated with some emails regarding the junior custodian staff, and I know that, I guess the gist of it is that you're looking at probably privatizing or using another way of doing that, maybe as a cost savings, and whether that's been documented or not. But just again, I know you've kind of answered it somewhat in an email, but
Yep.
I'm a little hesitant to go along with it because, sometimes privatization is not the same. We talked about here, looked at privatizing some services, but when it comes to custodian services and that, sometimes you just have to have your employees there so you can make sure they do it the right way and you know who they are and what they're doing. So maybe a little rationale and what if there's any way to maybe, what you had to do to change that decision, what other decisions would you have to make that happen? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that question. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about the timeline. I know that that the abruptness of the unveiling of that thought, was disturbing, not only to city councilors, but also to people in the community at large. And there was reason to my rationale on that, and that was that I'm an optimist, and I always, hope is not a strategy, but it's one that I use on a regular basis. And my goal was that as things move through the House of Representatives and the Senate, that a lot of the things that I would be looking for to continue some of the funding would remain in place. The one that's most obvious is full-day kindergarten. You've been inundated not only by their emails, but by emails from me, reminding everyone that this is coming before the House, this is coming before the Senate. There are a few areas that are important to the Fitchburg Public Schools. Full-day kindergarten is one of those. It's really a game changer. That's $200,000, in the budget. And right now, the budget that we're moving forward with is still carrying that liability because I'm the optimist that, one way or another, that's going to happen. And if there's anything I cannot sacrifice in this district is the full-day kindergarten that we've spent so long to build and that I really believe is the foundation. So while we were looking at a lot of options, as you know, and I put forward in my letter to you this weekend, we've looked at energy savings, and it's been a concerted effort to go for bonds and put in new boilers, put in new windows, put in new roofs. And if you look back over the budgets of the last 3 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings, have been generated by that. In the budget we have before you, it's about $200,000 of additional savings that I'm able to put into next year's budget. We did the same thing with transportation. We changed our bus routes. We look at our bus routes very carefully. We diminished one year the number of buses, I think by five buses at $45,000 a bus. But you reach a point where, unfortunately, the geographic area of Fitchburg is not shrinking. So with the students that are here, we need to do that. So that's another area we've looked at. And we've gone back and looked at different areas in the budget. And one of the areas that we looked at this year was our custodial costs. And what is it costing us, to clean our buildings? And this is not, so it's not confused with the HVAC and the other work that's done in the schools, because we're committed, we have a position now for HVAC, and that position is there to hold our commitment to whatever we've done to upgrade our boilers and our HVAC system. We have to have a person in place who maintains that for the taxpayer. So the area we've looked at is the cleaning of the buildings. Not only like you, I take every one of those emails seriously. I take all these conversations seriously. I realize that these decisions are not made in a vacuum. They're made in a real community, a community of workers, a community of families. I've had a lot of conversations with my cabinet staff. I've had conversations with the school committee. And what I want to make clear is this is not set in stone. The cement is not dry on this. This is one area that I'm looking at. I'm looking at our custodial services and the cleaning of our buildings and what can I do to maintain our buildings and reduce costs. And this morning we began looking at some other possibilities, some other ideas. We have a school committee meeting coming up on Monday. I plan to bring additional ideas for budget balance to the school committee. One of our school committee members asked me at the last meeting, she said, if I vote on this budget of $50,200,000, am I voting in support of outsourcing custodial? And my answer was no. Those are two separate issues. By voting on the budget, she voted on a bottom line. And now we're going to continue the discussion in terms of how are we going to address any shortfalls that we have in the budget. And right now, that's one that I'm looking at. So we've just started today, again, bringing new eyes to that. I'm still hoping the deliberation at the State House has not completed when it comes to the funding of full-day kindergarten. So I encourage everyone to continue to push that agenda, because that would be a huge relief if that money came through. So to answer your question, that's how I got to the idea of looking at that. It is not a done deal. It is something, I work for the school committee. And there was discussion at the last school committee meeting that people had hesitations about this particular route, and they had hesitations about the timeline. So when we meet on Monday, I will be going back to them, bringing them additional information of other possible options. With that said, the only option to a reduction is a reduction. And unless there is an addition somewhere in the multiple. So unless we get additional state aid, or unless there's something other way to do it, I have to balance the budget, and I have to move forward with the balanced budget. And as it is, there are some lines in this budget as it moves through the process that I'm less than comfortable with, but I'm willing to live with. So we've really gone back again and looked at staffing areas, and as we look at them, we just keep asking ourselves the same question. Can we make these reductions and still maintain the high-quality program that we've put into place over the years? And I think right now, where we are, we're able to do that.
I just think on the outsourcing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think in this type of scenario, it may not work as well. You never know who you're going to get. It's sometimes a transient population that comes through. There's no ownership, whereas the custodian staff we have now, there's ownership there. But in addition to that, I think they provide more than just custodial services. I've heard anecdotal stories. They're almost like guidance counselors. There's the eyes and ears of the principal. They hear things, see things that other staff don't see. So I think they're above and beyond just the custodian staff, and I think we got to look at the other things that they bring to the table than looking at outsourcing, where you never know who you're going to get. There's no accountability, and there could be other problems. That sure, you may save some money short term, but I'm not sure in the long term it's the right decision. And I understand you have decisions to make, but I appreciate your honesty in saying that it's not in cement, and I appreciate that, and hopefully you can look at some other options.
We're looking at all of that, and other people share your point of view.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
If I could just
Certainly.
Mr. Bean, there has only been from the Resource Committee to explore, to get some information. There has been no discussion to outsource, with the school committee. We have just to try and gain some preliminary information. And I agree with you. I think people are our most important asset that we have.
Right.
And people are the most important thing we have in Fitchburg.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I concur with Councilor Bean in terms of you don't know who you're getting. They're not vested in the community. They're not the eyes and ears for the principals and for the teachers that the employees there. And so I hope that you will do everything. While I understand and appreciate the necessity for you and the school committee to explore all options and all cost-saving measures in order to balance your budget, that is one step that I would be opposed to and disagree with. Having said that, I've got a couple questions for you, though, Andre. Does this budget include anticipated contract negotiations and what those increases might be?
It incorporates it. In this budget, there's opportunities for me to negotiate contracts.
Okay. And the other one is in relationship to this custodial question and in trying to make cuts in things. Excuse me. Write it down before I forget. The school department gives the city of Fitchburg, meaning the city, the body, and many residents and many other agencies, departments, whatever, opportunity to use city buildings for extended periods of time. As an example, is we're sitting in a school department building tonight. I know that the park board meets in a school department building. I know that this department and that department and this agency and that agency use school buildings. Is there a cost associated with that you guys write off instead of charging back to the city, or it's back to the city council, or to all those other people? And what's that number like?
I don't know the specific number, but there's a cost. Anytime you're keeping facilities open, you have a cost, and it's probably substantial. But I couldn't give you.
Right. Okay. Would it be possible to have somebody look into that?
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for an exact cost. I'm just looking for a ballpark, because exactly substantial is a word that as soon as you use that, things start going ching 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 for me.
Right.
You know. So if you could do that, I would appreciate that.
I will. And like I said, we're looking at all options. You know, I've been directed by the school committee to. This is still an option. So all these options are open. But what we're trying to do now is continue to look at other options and how we might balance the budget. But just to repeat, I have to balance the budget. I have to make sure that I have found the reductions or the additional funding so that when we open in September, I'm able to cover our costs.
Councilor Boschman.
My Council Bean, I can tell you some stories when GE found out custodian work and they hired an outside contractor, and you'd be amazed that you go by price and you're saving money. But I was there and I know firsthand, this thing's in hearsay. When you watch a guy come in and wash the floor and put the mop in the bowl and wash the bowl with the mop and then take the same mop and wash the toilet seat, you'd be amazed at that, and it does happen, and I'm not making it up. So I would prefer you really work real hard. Now back to energy. With all this stuff you're seeing around going to the city of Fitchburg, and you look on roofs on different houses and you see solar panels, how come you guys are not utilizing it with flat roofs?
I'm going to turn that over to Bob.
Actually, we were just approved by a grant by the Department of Environmental Resources to do a structural feasibility study here at Memorial. So we expect that study to be complete sometime this month or next. And that'll really be kind of the basis for us going forward with a solar proposal. Now, one thing that you should be aware of is that Unitil is only allowed to grant so much solar capacity within its operating environment. And they were at its max, at or close to its max, with either current projects or projects in the pipeline. I know there's been discussion of increasing that capacity at the state level, but it's something that we should explore, not only as a school department, but as a city, because there are vendors who we've met with who have said there should be solar panels on top of parking garages, for example, the one across the street from City Hall. So that's something that we're looking at to, again, try to be more efficient and effective with our energy dollars.
And we began looking at it actually 3 or 4 years ago, and then it was at the same time we were going out with MSBA to get the new roof here. So that got approved, which put the stall on the solar panels because we needed to move forward and get the roof on first. So we've just been approved to go the next step, and we're going to do that.
Now, you had a question. The city doesn't have a full-time licensed electrician or a carpenter or a plumber except for the inspectors. Do you think it would be feasible where you can save money and the city can save money if we had those 3 positions full with a electrical? Because I got a price from Mr. Richard, and he said, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we spent $24,000 for electrical work, and it wasn't all the work that could be done, that we only picked certain items. But there was a lot more work, and we pick and choose what we're going to do. You think it would be in our best interest to have a central guy for like carpentry, plumbing, and electrical?
Yep.
We already have 2 carpenters on our staff. I'd say, based on conversations I've had with Joe, if we were to, from a school department perspective, our greatest need would be to add a second HVAC person, because that can help with reducing our energy expense as well. So,
but we're open to any kind of, if somebody approaches us and says, we don't need a full-time, you don't need a full-time, can we have a conversation about this particular area we're open to that. We've already got examples of things that we do that way already, so. we'd look at that.
Okay, and Counselor to my right might get upset with this, but I've entered some of your schools, and we still got 2 more to go to, the Memorial and the other one down there, Fitchburg High, the former Longview School. I talked to you last year, my first year on the council, about school uniforms. And I gave you Haverhill as an example. You stepped in, you said, well, the state took over. Then I did more research, and I've been watching. You started it, I believe, in the South Fitchburg School, and you had a survey taken, and 73% of the Latinos wanted school uniforms. 50-plus people, different races, wanted school uniforms. And all of a sudden, it just dropped. Like a hot tomato, it just dropped. Why is it? I mean, if the poor people, and I use poor, can't afford it, but they can afford to get their kids one set of clothes, because they got to buy clothes from them anyway. And instead of trying to keep up with the Joneses over here, where they're buying Mikey Air jumping sneakers here to be in style, we can help them out, and we can help the whole city. I'm not saying it's going to make Johnny will be smarter, but everybody will be the same. Why aren't we doing it?
Well, we had a teacher from South Street Elementary School came to the school committee and said he and some of the PTO parents at South Street wanted to pilot it. They piloted it, and then when they tried to expand it to the rest of the school, the interest wasn't there. And really, if you try to mandate a school uniform, you're now going to give the principal and the assistant principal another full-time job. Because if people don't want it, you know, and that's the advantage you have, to be honest with you, in a small charter school or something else, is that, you know, one school decides we're about this, we're all going to do it together. But in a school like South Street of almost 650 students and lots of parents, you know, to get distracted on implementing something that there's a big number of parents that don't want it to happen, when you know it only takes a few people who don't want something to happen and it won't happen, it's just not where the energy will go. And the school committee, and Sally Cragen is here, she was a big proponent of uniforms. We went back and forth on it 2 or 3 times, and every time we get the train on the track, it goes off the track someplace, and you know, no one's there to put it back on. Doesn't devalue the idea, but it's a lot of work and a lot of effort that needs to go into raising the consciousness to get a concerted opinion among a whole school to say, yeah, we're going.
Well, in Haverhill, they say sometimes when I read things, our sister city, because basically they get geographically the same, a lot of poor people and that. And their school system is just as big, if I'm not mistaken, and they say it works out there. It literally works. In the beginning, they were having trouble, but it becomes like anything else. If everybody over here is wearing a tie, and you don't have a tie, well, actuality, you feel like an oddball. So tomorrow, everybody comes in with a tie, he's going to come in with a tie, because you don't want to feel different. You want to be the same. I don't know why we don't do it, because when I went to St. Joe's, we had to have a uniform. And it worked. And we weren't rich, but and then we passed it down from one member to the other member, and it really works good. And you go to St. Bernard's High, it's the same thing. I know they have a little bit more money than some of the students at Fitchburg High, but it works. It's a proven fact that it does work. And what I've been reading, it's just that we don't want to take, quote, we think we're infringing on their rights, and I don't think we are infringing. We're making everybody the same, and we're helping them. Now you don't have to go to the store and say, I got to get one shirt bigger than him, better than him. I got to have the name up here, Michael Jordan. Why do you want to pay Michael Jordan more money?
Well, the school committee has a retreat coming up this summer, and it's a place where basically they say, what are some of the ideas we want to look at? So I'll encourage the school committee to put it on the agenda for the retreat this summer, and they can look at it.
And one final question. How many students leave and how many students come in?
It's easier to do in dollars right now, or can you do it in students or in dollars?
Roughly in students, I think we have about 430, 440 going out, and about, I think about 180, 190 coming in. But on dollars, it's about 2.4 going out and about $1 million coming in.
It's almost 2 to 1, right?
Yes.
Am I hearing that right?
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And my big thing is, when I went around with you guys, and you were there too. My thing is, we're a poor community. And I keep saying it. I know I've been in your school and you show a chart saying 98% of the students are going on to college. Well, I fared it different with that statement. Because if that's the case, why are we poor? This community is poor. We get double-digit unemployment, and we're unskilled. We're unskilled. We got 378 students that go to Monty Tech, and I bet you they could get more if we would let more in. Why aren't we working with the universities, like Mount Wachusett Community College and the university, to say to a student like me that couldn't get into Monty Tech, but I'm good with my hands and I'm good at carpentry, or I'm good at mechanical stuff, and work with them in their IT or Mount Wachusett. I know you told me the law is entirely different, and I try to understand what you're saying, but I can't get into Monty Tech. I'm not going to go to the Job Corps. I don't want to work at Job Corps. I'll go to Job Corps. Why can't we do something for these students? So when they come out, they have the basic fundamentals. They don't have to go to work a day, because I can't stand work a day, to be honest with you. I hate it. I'm sorry. And they can go into a job that's get a job.
Well, among the many emails that you've received from me, one of them was talking to you about the cybersecurity initiative that we're doing with Monty Tech. I've been working with Sheila Harity and Monty Tech and their cybersecurity folks. And this summer, we're going to have a cybersecurity camp for our middle school students, for 50 students, possibly 55 or 56, because the sign-up has been out of, really crazy. And one of the reasons we're looking at that, because that's a huge next career place. And I don't have to put in lathes or plumbing equipment or whatever. I just need computers. And our kids love this, because basically working in cybersecurity uses all of the same skills that gaming does. And some of our kids spend a little bit of time on gaming. So what we're working together to do is create this cyber security camp for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And while we're doing that, we're going to be developing a curriculum for after-school programs in our middle schools on cybersecurity and all the things around it. And then with Monty Tech, we're developing a high school curriculum at both of our high schools, so that wherever students go, they've got a track. And Mount Wachusett and Fitchburg State already have programs in cybersecurity. So we're trying to do those kinds of things.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
Andre, Mr. Stevens, in the last few days, I've gotten more emails about you outsourcing the janitors than you can believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just checked just now to see, since I've been here, I got 2 more. I think it's I think the citizens are in an uproar over it. I think you're going to create a morale problem within the school. Your budget of $52 million?
$50,200,000.
200,000. 200,000 is, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's very small. I just think it's not a good decision to make to do that. I hope that you can resolve this before we vote on our final budget, because I don't want to not vote for the budget because of this one issue. I feel very strongly that unless you resolve this and I have an answer that you're not going to do it this fiscal year, I don't think I could vote for this budget.
Well, I hope, you heard what I said earlier.
I did.
So it's the same thing.
I'm pretty straight. I'm
Yep.
telling you.
I appreciate that. You have been.
If you make a decision and
Yeah.
I hear that
Yeah.
you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
I
And
will vote
my
for the budget.
my dilemma is going to be, what decision am I going to make that's not going to offend someone? So, because
I don't want to be you.
because that's right. But I know that comes with the job, and I think my track record has been to listen to people, to not be intransigent, just because an idea is out. And if there's another way to do it, I'll take in any suggestions and recommendations. But in the end, I have to balance the budget, and I've heard it loud and clear. This was not a done deal, and there's a lot that has been said and it has gone around about this. It's not accurate, but to try to address any inaccuracies is irrelevant. The issue is to hear the input and then try to work with the school committee to come up with a solution that meets the needs not only of the schools but is respectful of the community, and I intend to do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Decidedly negative dialogue to start. So I'll open up on a positive one. Quite honestly, I think all of you gentlemen and throughout the entire system, you do a wonderful job. I think the school system over your tenure has taken a magnificent turn for the better. I do not yet have children, but I soon look forward to in the next 5 years of putting them through the Fitchburg Public School System, and I trust the work that you do day in and day out to improve the learning and educational opportunities, programmatic opportunities that are available to our current generation of students, and I trust the decision making that you make for the future generations of students, so that we can continue to move forward as a city. Every dollar that we spend today is a dollar that hopefully is multiplied 50 times over decades from now. If I had $100 million to give to the city, I'd look to economic development in the schools as my top priorities. I'd sleep easy knowing that you'd invest them wisely in today's students and our future. Without getting into too many details, I know some of the collaborations that you have with existing nonprofits and institutions of higher learning in the area is tremendous. The Footsteps to Brilliance I recently heard about through my role at Fitchburg State University. I was absolutely amazed. I know the work that you're doing to bring childhood literacy up to standard with our peers in other cities in the region is remarkable. So I look forward to hearing a lot more about that program and seeing it more in the press in the years to come. And I certainly appreciate all the positives that you send out on a daily basis to us, particularly the rates of college applications, college-bound students, and the different institutions that our graduates from Fitchburg High will be attending next year. Truly remarkable. To address, I guess, the elephant in the room that other counselors have been discussing. It's an uncomfortable situation, I think, for everyone. The budget is what it is. There's no pockets of, we can make as many cuts in this room as we want, but I don't think there's millions of dollars sitting around the table for us to just easily shuffle from here to there. And I know the decision isn't an easy one. There's different pools of money, and if you cut from one area, you're cutting services. If you cut from one area, you're cutting, programmatic opportunities for our students. So I know it's going to be a tough week ahead as you look at all the options that are before you. But I do applaud you for taking a look at at every single opportunity that's in front of you, and looking to see where you can continue to do more with less. I certainly hope it doesn't come down to that, but certainly, I admire you looking at the tough decisions and looking to see where we can continue to maintain that same high rate of education while doing more with less. So thank you for everything you do.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I understand clearly, being a former school committee member, what is required every year for budget cuts and whatnot. I prepared a statement because I don't like to ramble, and I have some comments and questions after this. The Fitchburg Public Schools FY16 budget plan includes $200,000 of operational efficiencies. And one of the options on the table is the outsourcing of 17 junior custodial jobs. My understanding also is that senior custodial staff will not be cut. While I have advocated for privatization of certain municipal functions to achieve cost savings, especially with regard to long-term liabilities like pension and health care, my advocacy is on a case-by-case basis. And these statements are more generated towards the school committee than the administration, because it's the school committee who is the chief arbiter of the school spending, school policy, and the like. In my opinion, gentlemen, the custodial positions are not a candidate for privatization. The removal of several junior-level custodial positions will, in my opinion, leave each school in the city's district deficient in cleaning and maintenance needs. Far too often I hear that custodial positions in today's market are nothing more than cleaning crews. However, this viewpoint emphasizes the lack of understanding and full scope of just what a custodian provides to the schools he or she works for. Having been a student myself, I witness firsthand every day the importance and scope of responsibilities these individuals are tasked with performing. They are not merely cleaners. They also provide routine maintenance, repairs, but most importantly, they have a partner they are a partner to the school's school's administrators, teachers, and students. They are a partner. Having a mother who was a public school teacher for 36 years and a wife who is a current public school teacher, I understand how important custodial staffers are to teachers and students. If there is something that malfunctions in the classroom, the custodians are called. If a child falls ill during class, a custodian is called. If a teacher needs supplies either for his or her students, for themselves, or for the classroom, the custodian is called. I like to think of custodians as the school's first responders to those on the front lines of education. Custodians are there on nights and weekends for school, city, and athletic events. When privatizing any service, that decision has to be measured against what you are giving up. What specific job duties will this company, if this were the option, be contracted to perform? Will there be private staff inside the school at all times, or will they only be present after school hours? If only one senior level custodian is kept, how many does that leave for each school? Can one senior custodian handle hundreds, if not thousands, of students in a building with multiple rooms, bathrooms, and maintenance needs? What will happen if a custodian is attending to something in a school and a teacher has something malfunction in his or her own room, or a student falls ill? It is now going to be the teacher's responsibility to handle the situation from a sanitary standpoint, in addition to their multiple other responsibilities that people at the state and federal level who have no business making education decisions are making for them to do. As for the final financial motivations, it has been stated that each year for the past few years, grant funding has declined, as I understand, while costs have increased, driving the need for this major change as an option. $200,000 out of $50 million is a mere 0.004% of the budget. It's not even 0.01%. I find it very hard to believe, being a former school committee member, that the school district cannot realize cost savings or efficiencies via another means for this 0.004%. If this is the avenue the school committee will take ultimately, I will absolutely vote no against this budget. And with that said, it was stated earlier that 3 administrative positions were cut. Are there any other administrative positions that were added?
No.
None.
None. No.
If I look at the Status C budget reports from FY10 to FY15, and this is just some food for thought for counselors, and this is what I do across the whole city, so this isn't just the school thing.
May I retract that statement?
Sure.
At one of our school committee members, McKay is an innovation school.
Yep.
And the board and Lourdes came to us, the principal came to us, the interim principal, and said, we would like to add a vice principal because it's a pre-K to 8 school, and the needs were different as opposed to an elementary school and a middle school. And I said, well, I don't have the money in the budget to add an administrator. So the school came forward and said, we will cut our security para and our home liaison. And that was a total of $32,000. And based on the needs of the school, which I believed were real, the school committee added $53,000 in the city budget. So I just thought of that while you were talking, that we added that vice principal at McKay.
Okay, so just to put this into context, the maintenance costs since 2010, and I'm using the reports I get from Mr. Saracen. Any line item that says maintenance of equipment, maintenance salaries, maintenance contracted services. In FY10, it was $1.752 million. FY15, it's $1.585 million, a reduction of 10%. Meanwhile, in that same time period, the superintendent's office has gone up 18.5%, and the business office has gone up 26.5%. And I see nowhere in the FY15 budget instructional supplies. None.
Here's the reason for that, and if you remember from 4 or 5 years ago, our budget deficit was so drastic at that time, we removed all instructional supplies out of the city budget and put it in school choice. So for the last 5 years,
Yeah.
for the last 5 years, the city has not paid for instructional supplies. That's how dire a budget situation. I don't know of another school district where instructional supplies are not paid out of the town or the city budget.
So are we
May I-
paying for,
may I
school-
elaborate?
we paying for instructional supplies?
Yes.
Can I
Where are they in the FY15
They're in
budget?
school
They're in the
choice, so
school
they're not
choice.
in the city budget.
Okay, so,
They come out of the school choice revolving account.
Right, they
And a-
have
and a
for 5
listing-
years.
And a listing of the spending is presented in tab 5.
gentlemen, I know you're trying your best, and I know you're not in a good position.
Really trying
Okay,
very
but
hard.
you know what? I just so you understand, if you follow the meetings, I take the same approach across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I do this to every department. I look at the last 6 or 7 years of spending, and I see trends develop. One of my requests, which I didn't think of until just now, there is a line item in the school department budget every year called continued appropriations, and that's the encumbrances. I'd like to get a full listing of what those encumbrances are. Going back to 2010, I want them each year for the last 6 years, because when I look at the school department's budget, I understand that there is a encumbrance for teacher salaries over the course of the summer. And then there's also a line item called general expenses encumbered. I want to know what that is. I want to know what that relates to, because in the Status E, it's not specific. It's just one number to balance, because the state requires us to spend the money. We cannot have leftover money in the schools. It's got to be spent at the net minimum, as long as we fund the net minimum. But there are percentages here that I know are small in comparison to dollars. But, the maintenance budget is only 3% of the whole city of Fitchburg Public Schools budget. And we've cut maintenance costs by 10%, and those other 2 areas I cited went up by over a quarter. It's just the perception of it, the logistics. Although I get you've made cuts in administration.
Yeah,
But
3
in those 2 line items, they've gone up by leaps and bounds. These are the numbers. I'm not making this up. So I will find it very hard-pressed that you guys cannot find $200,000 out of $50.2 million. And that task is with the school committee. Now, when I was a school committee member, I took a lot of heat from fellow committee members, because I don't know if you remember this, I would be a real pain in the you-know-what during I would be a real pain in the butt during finance meetings, to the point where I had other committee members look at me and go, "Why are you asking these questions? It's the superintendent who's the expert. He should determine what the budget is." To which I replied, "What good are we then?" So that's why my comments are directed at them, not at you. Because for what you two are seeking to do in collaboration with the school committee, they're the ultimate ones who make the call, not you two. So my advice is that something be found, and I'm not an expert, I just look at numbers. I find it very hard to believe, because, gentlemen, if in order for a decision to be rendered, it is very important to understand very clearly what this new contract with this private vendor, if that's the option you go with, what they're specifically going to be doing. Because I'll tell you, it scares me to think what would happen if there are no full-time custodial staff in the schools who can be called upon at a moment's notice with 800 or 900 kids in their 6, 7, and 8-year-old range. It can get interesting without custodial staff around, I'm sure.
So 2 things. One is the encumbrances. For example, let's use this year. And I think it was in my memo, or one of the things, there's been an additional appropriation, or it's being looked at, an additional appropriation of $300,000. And we stated that encumbrance would be for new textbooks for Fitchburg High School, because we're changing curriculum and changing the schedule. And then the other part of that is to renovate all of the gym floors in all of our schools. So that's like one example, but that's the kind of thing, that ends up in an encumbrance, because it's not work like teacher salaries for summer. It's not work that can be done now. But we can provide you either through Dick Saracen or answers that you would need in any of that.
School transportation.
You provide the schedule on the city side of what specifically it is. It would just be.
You're all done, Counselor?
Yes, I'm done, yes.
I'd just like to, 1 second, Pete. I just want to follow up. Counselor Di Natale made a point that set the bell off in my head. I'd already told you that I was opposed to this, but when he talked about the custodians being partners, I don't know how many of you can name your teachers that you had in your elementary school, but I can tell you at the Goodrich Street School from 1960 to 1967, while I attended there, Mr. Belanger was our custodian, and he did all of those things that Councilor Di Natale talked about, and he was a part of the team that raised those kids and educated those kids. That's how important those folks are. Mr. Stevens, you'd like to respond?
Just to Mark, the school committee has not taken a vote. I'm not sure there are votes there to privatize. There are school committee members who are against it. I spoke to, so I think as we go along here, the superintendent today, I asked him this afternoon on a negotiating meeting, what other ways can we do it? It's not, there hasn't been a discussion. And again, like me living here longer than everybody, older than everybody here, this is my community. I live with these people, some of my friends. We're looking for ways, but we also had to, as a committee, to explore other ways. But that doesn't mean all school committee members are for this. And we have not had that hard discussion yet, and I don't know what would happen if it came to a vote at a committee meeting. So that's...
Well, and let me just to put a couple of numbers out there, because we talk about the $50,200,000, but remember that that's quite a bit under net school spending, and that there have been a series of cuts over a long period of time. So to use a number that might be simple to look at, the additional appropriation this year is $700,000. If you look in transportation, there's $310,000 in special ed summer transportation, and another, is it 62?
66.
Another $66,000 in regular ed transportation. So that's almost $400,000. So just let's say, here's $700,000. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, run the school system next year. Oh, by the way, you don't have $700,000. You have $300,000. And then you're going to help McKay to add a vice principal because that's the right thing to do for kids. Take out another $53,000. And I could go down the Munis document and show you that even though that number is big, most of that number is accounted for. And it's accounted for in staffing. So when you go to look at it, you're looking at how are you going to address this deficit? How are you going to run a school system where if you add up all of the line items, I can tell you they come over way over $700,000 in order to balance the budget. And oh, by the way, Mr. Superintendent, you're in negotiations with 7 bargaining units. That's your job, is to meet with them, convince them of their worth, and then convince them of how their worth will be valued in a school system that's almost $1 million below net school spending, and yet, and I would put my hand on a Bible on this, is providing one of the best educations that you can get in the state of Massachusetts, because we're meeting every kid's needs. That's what this school system does. We're not just meeting some kids' needs, we're meeting the needs of advanced, of students with all kinds of disabilities, of students that are homeless. We figure out who are they, what do they need. And in the many years that I've worked with these school committees, that's what they do all the time, is go back at it. And what I absolutely never want to give the impression of is that I don't value custodians. Because I come from a blue-collar family, and all of the people who work in cafeteria workers will know, because I'm proud of it. My mother was a cafeteria worker, my father was a butcher. That's what we did. And we lived in Southbridge, Massachusetts, which is very much like Fitchburg. You know, everyone was the fabric of the community. So when I approach these, I lose sleep overnight coming up with these. And that's why you didn't even hear about this until a week ago. Because my goal was to turn over every rock I could to get federal funding, state funding, local funding, grant funding, or whatever else I can in order to not affect not only the program, but the people who come here every day to work. I value them. You know, and I'm famous for one saying: if somebody spills their tray in the cafeteria, look for a broom, not a custodian. Because I can pick up the junk in the cafeteria floor just as well as anyone else, and it's not below me because the work that they do is very important. I value it also. So that's the context that this is going in. I realize that pretty much any decision that I would bring forward that would have impact on a human being is going to be a challenge on anyone else to make that. But I have to do that. But I'll go back to that drawing board, I'll go back to that rock, turn it over again and again and again to see what I can do to minimize the impact on community members and our staff, but I have a responsibility to maximize the educational experience of our students. That's my job.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Andre, and for those people counting score at home, according to the dress code uniforms, that was actually David Stanky, who was on the school committee, and Bernie D. Pasquale, who, after losing his vote for the dress code, moved to South Carolina and is shooting golf somewhere. Andre, what are these, how much do you really save when you go through something like this? I mean, you've wiggled out the $200,000 figure, but how much do you really save? I mean, is there unemployment that the city has to shell out or the school department has to shell out? Is there health insurance? I mean, so how much really goes?
The 200,000 is an estimate. We're looking at all of those things, which is why I say the process is only in the early stages.
Okay.
We're just looking at this. We're talking to districts. We've talked to 2 other districts today, you know, just to get information on that. And again, depending on which district you talk to, you might get a district that's been very happy with their provider for 5 years. You may have another one that's gone through 3 providers. So, you know, there's anecdotal and then there's also reality. So we're looking at that. I'm trying to get to a number. And I really believe that I had used up all of the usual places that we go to. There was nothing left to squeeze out of transportation. There was nothing left to squeeze out of energy costs. There was nothing left to squeeze out of special education outside placement. So it's where do you go from there? Which is why, and it was not an easy decision to make, in this day of accountability and curriculum, we just eliminated the ELA curriculum director for the whole school. And yet we have all kinds of curriculum that needs to be implemented. So that work is going to fall on other administrators, and they get it. They're used to that. That's been happening for many years. That's fine. And the same way with the vice principal at the high school. They needed an additional staff at the high school, and I worked with Jeremy and said, I can't give you enough for all this additional staff. What can you do in your structure? And he said, I'll reduce by a vice principal because teachers in the classroom are more important to me right now. That's where I need them because of this change in schedule. So there's a lot of work and hours and days of excruciating deliberation and pain that went on behind this.
I'm sure.
But the message I'm giving is it's not over yet. It's not over yet on both sides, either revenue side or ways of us looking for possible methods of meeting that deficit.
I hear you, and I have no doubt that you and your staff will put something together. And we have a lot of faith in you and your staff. Thank you.
Councilor Beazall.
Thank you. First of all, my janitor's name was Mr. Bilo, Free Street School. And one of the things I think you lose is that personal touch, especially from children who know who the janitor is, who meets them and talks to them in the hallway. And this is you know, when I first heard this, and I mean, I know everyone and how, I'm just saying, wow, this is like a decision that, you know, we often say that finances make decisions. People are just the ones that go through the process and finally come out to what it's supposed to be. First of all, the other thing too is I want to state that you, probably everyone, I can't say enough about the school department. There's so much pride. Every morning I wake up, I get an email, something about the school department. And it's really, I can't say enough for the people that have dedicated their time and who work for the school system. So thank you very much with that. But my question is through the course of so many years, there's been so many state mandates, and they mandate this, mandate that, mandate. Have you seen any of the mandates sort of relaxed as the budgets were cut back? Because basically I felt that the state, through all their mandates, have kind of hung everyone out to dry. You know, they want you to do all of this. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to give you any money to support it. So have you seen them decrease or?
No, the mandates are on a train and it's full throttle ahead. There are more mandates coming our way now than ever before. They have not. Now, I'm going to be the president of the Superintendent's Association for the state. This is the 3rd year in a row we put forward a bill on unfunded mandates. It goes nowhere. And we've listed them, and there are dozens and dozens. And each one of those was passed for a particular event, and none of them came with the funding to implement them. So but it's getting, this year I would say it got the more serious look than it's ever gotten, because folks are looking for solutions statewide to reducing costs. And some of the solutions are sitting in these bills that have added additional costs, and I'm sure on the municipal side it's the same way, have added additional costs with no additional funding, in reverse with the reduction in funding all the time. So I'd love to say yes, people have heard us and it's happening, but unfortunately it's the opposite.
So what would it take from a city side? I mean, does the city have any leverage? Do we have any pressure? Do we have anything that we can?
The pressure is on our legislators. I can't tell you how difficult it is for me to even get somebody to write an email to a legislator to advocate for money for the schools. I send out boilerplate emails that all people have to do is cut and paste them, put in the name of somebody or of 30 people and send them. They will tell you that's what works. As you can see tonight, what works is contact your elected officials if you want something done. Well, it works at the local level and it works at the state level. And I write and email and call the legislators all the time whenever I know that there's a possibility of me getting another dollar from the state. But if I'm a lone voice, and if our 800 employees aren't doing it and no one else is doing it, then Fitchburg's just a lone voice that no one's going to pay attention to. And this full-day kindergarten is a perfect issue because a lot of communities don't want full-day kindergarten. The communities that want it are mostly the gateway cities and small municipalities. So there's no leverage there. I can't go to a lot of other superintendents and say, come with me, we're going to get this all-day kindergarten money. Because their view is if it doesn't come to us for all-day K, it's going to go to them for something else. So the method and the idea is all the time, advocate, advocate, advocate for the schools at the state level and for what we need. And I think that can make a difference. And I plan to do that, next year as the president of the MASS statewide.
Okay, thank you.
Comment?
Yes.
I'm Fitchburg's representative to the CAPS Special Needs Collaborative, which is 11 area towns. And collaboratives are now falling under some of the state mandates, which now we have to provide more staff, and then we have to pass on increased costs to our 11-member district communities. So but it comes from the state mandate and increases the cost.
Councilor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Superintendent, I'm not going to say much on the custodial issue because it's in its infant stage. All I'm asking is that you don't leave any stone unturned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Looking over the budget, one thing that I'm really appreciative of is that there's no reduction in teaching positions, no reduction in academic curriculum activities, and no reduction in academic programs.
None.
I think those are three very important components that we need in order to provide the best education we can to our students. I know that you're asking for an appropriation of $300,000, and a portion of that is going to textbooks because we're moving from a 7 drop 2 to from a 4
Different schedule, yeah.
4 course schedule to 7 drop 2.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate what a 7 drop 2 is?
I wish Jeremy was here. They've had a committee at the high school for 2 years of the
Paula is
teachers.
raising her hand
And
behind
Paula
you.
can come, oh, Paula, you can elaborate on the 7 drop 2. Well, can you come up here?
I sat in on some of the meetings that Jeremy held
With his staff.
staff. He had a very large committee. They've spent the better part of 2 years studying the issues with the long block schedule. Long block schedule means there were 4 classes during the day of about 95 to 110 minutes. And he had slide after slide of pros and cons, doing a sort of a cost-benefit analysis. And the issues with that 4-block schedule, students were scheduled out of electives. There just wasn't time in the day. They were really limited when they got to be juniors and seniors in taking additional world languages, that second world language, that second or third science or math class, band, art, some of the more exciting electives that all kids like to take, so that the really high-level college-bound students were restricted because of the schedule. Some of the courses at the 4-block, it was based on a semester, so they took 4 classes first semester, 4 classes second, but the AP tests, for example, were in the spring. So if students were in AP Calc or Chemistry first semester, the test was in the spring. It really put them at a disadvantage to get those qualifying scores. And so they were adjusting the schedules to be full-year courses. Band is really a full-year course, but it only might have fit in their fall semester. But the band continues to work all year. So there were lots of issues like that around student choice. And so the school elected, and I mean the staff voted,
Yeah.
so there were multiple elections to really vet a multiple of kinds of scheduling. And this 7 drop 2 it's fairly complicated, but on any given day, there are 5 classes. They range in length of time from 65 minutes to about 90 minutes. The 90-minute class is around the lunch block, so there's time before lunch, time after. But 2 of the 7 classes are not scheduled on that day. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F. And then the next period, F or G might be dropped. The next day, it's the next 2, so that it's actually a 7-day cycle where 5 out of the 7 days every class meets. So no student will miss a class adjacent to an AP test. They're all year, the courses run for the full year. All students can now select a number of electives. They can have their 4 base core classes, English, science, math, social studies, but take band, or that second world language, or the second or third science or math class. And I think part of what drove this is, and I don't have the exact numbers, but 2 years ago, the AP selections, there were about 160 students enrolled in AP classes, and this year there are close to 600 students.
We've quadrupled the number of kids taking
Enrolled in
advanced
AP
placement
classes.
courses. And now the
quadrupled
band,
the choices.
and now the band can run year-round, and as you know, the band has been improving. They went back to Disney World, or going. They went to Disney World, for the first time in, I think, 10 years. They hadn't been while I was here. So there's just opportunities that are there. Now, the reason for the textbooks is when you had semestering, right? I would use the textbook for the first semester. Paula would use the textbook for the second semester. But now that we're going to year-long courses, you have to add, additional text materials so that students will all have their own textbook for the whole year. And there also have been some course changes, and we're putting in some new materials for those courses.
And this new schedule is going into effect next year?
September. Starts in September.
And you know that I've been a staunch advocate of providing materials and textbooks to our students.
Right.
And you've mentioned before that the cost has been coming out from the school choice.
Mm-hmm.
Is this cost coming up from school choice? Or
No.
No.
This is, if you vote on it tomorrow night, right here at this station, it's of the $300,000 additional appropriation that you're making, if you make it, this year. $150,000 of that is going to high school textbooks.
Why isn't that coming out from the school choice?
Well, right now, we have school choice money is, if we have a whole list, one of the pages in there, of things that are identified to use for school choice. For example, that advanced academic learning, those coaches that are doing advanced programs in the elementary and at the middle school, that costs $500,000. Not a penny of that comes out of your city budget. I'm using school choice money for that. Now, why does that make sense? Somebody said earlier, how many kids leave and how many kids go in? What I've been trying to do is keep kids here. And the way you keep them here is by having strong academic programs that people want to participate in. So we're using $500,000 of the money that comes to us from kids who come here to create a program for advanced opportunities for the kids who are here. So that's where, so if you take that $500,000 out of the million, then the rest we pay for middle school sports. All the middle school sports that have been going on for the number of years, that's all coming out of school choice. And as I said in my letter, it's not only giving phenomenal opportunities to our middle school students, it's really starting, the baseball team had 12 kids in it last year. This year, it had, I think, 16 or 17, or no, more than that, I think 20. But 35 kids came out for baseball. So those are the kinds of growth programs that we're doing in extracurricular and athletics and academics.
Just a comment on the cybersecurity program that you talked about earlier. And I think those programs are great because those are real-world programs that our students can learn from and can actually put it into good use. I think we need more of those programs. Actually, my daughter signed up for that program, and when I read the brochure, I said to her, "This is a great program. You know, not only you're going to learn about it, but it's going to help you in your future."
It will be unbelievable. They're going to have FBI people coming, people from NSA, people from the government coming and talking about not only the work, but the jobs that are out there. We can't create enough students ready to do these jobs. That's how saturated the market is going to be with those jobs. And I want Fitchburg Public Schools to be at the forefront of that.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Di Natale.
Just very quickly, on my prior question about any new positions in administration, what is the financial operations manager job for $85,000 currently posted?
That's an empty position right now due to a retirement that we have not filled.
Have we always had two people in finance, or was it always just one?
No, it was always had.
Even when Mr. Shabru was here?
This is an upgraded position of the person who retired.
I know, but before you came on board, wasn't there just Mr. Shabru?
No.
No.
There was a finance operator. Who was the? Okay, I didn't even know that when I was on the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't the same title. It's more of a payroll
But
manager.
the same person.
Okay.
Yeah, the same person.
Thank you. So that's a retirement fill.
Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I will keep you, you know, you can be sure you'll continue to get emails from me about the good stuff happening, and hopefully at some point, other emails will slow down.
Got a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.